Okay, so we're going to take a look at some of the homework that got turned in. We didn't really have a chance to do that last week because I hadn't had a chance to grade it. I'm going to try to get through this pretty quick. Would it surprise anybody in this class if I said we've got a lot to get to today? No. Okay, so in no particular order, just a couple of notes I've got on here. Some of this stuff was really common for everyone, so I just want to throw this part out. When you first start using any of variations, any of our approaches to refining edges, sometimes that works really great and sometimes it just fucks your image up. So just because refine edge is supposed to work does not mean it does. You need to look at what it did and make the decision, did this help or did this hurt my image? Because I got to be honest with you, it's a dice throw. It's about half the time it'll help your image, about half the time it'll make your image actually worse. So do not just blindly go in there and just start whipping across that refine edge tool in either the selected mask workspace or in that older version of refine edge that I showed you guys that I frankly prefer. So at any rate, just something to keep in mind about that. I want to take a look at Mark's 3. Oh shoot, hang on one second. Wrong week. So I did get through the grading all of these, and I did get notes back to all of you, but there's some language that I use in the responses that I sent back to you. I just want to make sure everybody's clear about what it is I'm talking about. So, and again, I'm not picking on anyone here. It's really the people who, unfortunately, his name comes earlier in the alphabet that get shown more of their work when we go over this stuff than the people at the end of it all. But I'm not trying to pick on anyone. It's stuff that happened, that happens with it's like across the board. Anything I point out, at least half of you have done. So, say what? Oh yeah, I know, right? So what can I tell you? So anyway, to take a look at just masks in general, and this is something that becomes really important that you need to start doing, is because you can get a mask that looks incredibly well, and in your compositing or in your selections or your tonal corrections or any of that kind of stuff that you're using a mask for, it can look like it's doing the perfect job, but that doesn't necessarily mean it really is. So there's some tricks to finding out. There are places that I need you to sort of get in the habit of looking at. So I want to actually look at the masks themselves. I don't want to look at the image, or I don't want to look at them. If you want to just see a single layer, you simply hold down your Option key and click, and it'll turn all the other eyeballs off. So you can see in this case, all the other eyeballs are off. If you hold down your Option key and click on the eyeball again, it turns everybody else back on. That part's great. I'm going to hold down the eyeball and click to turn everyone else off. If you want to hide the mask, you hover over the mask, hold down your Shift key and click, and it'll put a big red X on it. It'll also turn the eyeball back on again. So in this case, to get rid of the X so that it's in effect again, hold down the Shift key and click on it again. This will allow you to then see what the mask is actually doing in the image. And so in this part, it looks relatively good. If you want to see the mask itself, you hold down the Option key and click on the mask. And now we can really pay attention to the mask. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to zoom into this edge right here, and this is what I tend to look for right here. This is too crunchy. This is so for any of you where I said it looks like your mask is too aggressive, this is exactly what I mean. What's happening in here is that Mark actually was pushing his shadow. He pushed it further than really he needed to. And so you'll see that there's no transparency that's left in this hair. It gets really kind of blocky, but it also all the really sort of subtle area where it was transitioning from background to hair, there's background here that should be showing through that's actually not showing through. So anyway, I was just to give you guys, when I talk about a mask that is too aggressive, it's this kind of vibe that I'm talking about. Now, you can make this considerably worse. I'm going to actually add a quick level to this and show you what a really bad one would be. That's a really aggressive mask. So, okay. And you can see you're starting to pull in detail from the other thing to do. Yeah, I'm starting to, I mean, again, I've got a lot of, this would be contamination. So that's the other thing that I was talking about. So this you can see right here is contamination that's actually in the mask. Now I've been able to push it to get it to show up in here. If we go back in time before I actually did that levels part, but you run your cursor over the top up here, you can see in my info readout I'm getting 251s. If I move it around to 249, even if you can't see that there's contamination in there, there is. So anyway, your trick is to always look at your masks, but also when you're looking at your mask, tell me which is easier to see, because right now it's almost impossible to see contamination in this upper corner, right? But if I invert the mask, Command I, can you see those little snowflakes that are up in there now? Yeah, it's really hard to see it there. I can see it on my screen. Let me zoom in and see if I can't see it a little bit better. Can you see those now? Yeah, a little bit up there. So anyway, invert your masks. You're just doing this to inspect the mask. Yes? Yes, so, no, so the written project that you're doing, you can do that in Canvas. Yeah, so that's just a written one, put that in Canvas, but the images go on the hard drive. Okay, so that's that guy. We did all that. I want to take a look at Zoe's next. Oh, and this brings up, and you're not the only one who's done this, whatever. People are sending me not only their finished file, but their working files as well. And I'm getting copies of the assignment file as well, all of that kind of stuff. You don't need to give me, I just need the final piece that you put together. I don't need the original assignment file, a copy of it. In some, I want to say, not to point fingers here, but Mario, I think I got like 2 copies of every file that you had. So like, yeah, for assignment, for the pen tool assignment one, I'm fairly certain I got 2 copies of every single file, which is fine. No, yeah, you really want to make sure, yeah, so I'm going to double it up. Okay, anyway, it's not the end of the world, guys. It's the only time it gets weird is that there's sometimes where I can't really figure out which one it is you want me to grade, but this one was pretty, I think it was pretty obvious. So I'm going to go after number 3 here, and we'll see. Yeah. So can anybody spot anything? I'm going to actually pull this out that might be problematic with Zoe's image right here. Anyone? The skin one, what about this one right here? Yeah, so what's wrong with it? Oh, it's anything else? Anyone? Bingo. All the masks are inverted. They're all hiding exactly what they're meant to show, which isn't the end of the world. All you need to do is go in, hit Command I, Command I, Command I, Command I, and then I can look at. So it wasn't like, oh my God, she's, this is now hours of work, but you need to keep those things in mind. Okay, so again, at its core, in masking, when you've got something that is black in a mask, it is hiding that part of your image. When you've got something that's white, it's showing that part of the image. And then any of the transitions between black and white are levels of opacity. So if you're very close to white, it's showing the majority of the image. If you're very close to black, it's hiding the majority of the image. Does that make sense to everyone? Are we good on that part? Because again, we use this stuff to death, and if you haven't gotten masking down, that's something we really need to spend time and work on. Okay? All right. Yep. And that's all I have for you guys today. It's a beautiful day. Let's all just call it a quits and go out and no, sorry. I keep doing that to you, right? we're gonna get to like really shitty weather in the winter, and it's just gonna be all right. Well, we're in for the long haul here. I'd rather be inside than outside right now, but for what it's worth. Okay. Moving on to the path assignments that were turned in. So this one is a tricky one. So I'm going to show you. So this is Kirsta's, and in this, if we take a look at the front part is pretty much exactly what we look at. If we take a look at the back part right here, what you'll see is something that you shouldn't be seeing for the way we typically think of a normal path. So the problem is that I'm going to click on this thing, and you can see we get the outline of the path, and it looks great. If I want to see the points on it, I can actually grab either the black path selection tool or the white one. I'm going to grab the black one, and I'm simply going to click and drag across all of these so it'll select all the paths. And you can see that there's a lot of points on here, and this part's all working out really well. And as I zoom into here and take a look at this, all of these, I mean, the path work is beautiful. I mean, you can see it's tracking really well. Are there a couple of tweaks I might be able to make? Not enough, to be perfectly honest with you, that anyone would ever know. I mean, it's really well done. That part of it's well done. If I want to see what a single point looks like, you can see right now I've got the black arrow is actually selected. But if you hold down the command key, it temporarily will change to the white. If you let go of the command key, it goes back to the black. So remember, the difference in the black tool and the black arrow and the white arrow is with the black arrow, you select the entire path, and then you can move the path around, those sorts of things. But if you want to go in and actually edit your path, you need to use the white tool. The white tool is actually the white arrow tool. It's the one that allows you to select a single point or a number of specific points and either move just them or delete just them, or anyway, but I can also see what's going on. So if I hold down the command key and click on a single point right here, you'll see that there are only single handle lines that are coming off of this. About a third of you didn't really get the memo about trying to get rid of that second control handle. And in some cases, it worked fine. Again, depending on how your path edges are, you don't always have to remove the second control handle. But when you're first learning this tool, it helps to remove them all. It just is going to make your life easier and simpler to get the tool. Then once you get better, you'll realize the ones that you don't necessarily have to do that for, or that you do. So anyway, everything about this part looks great, except for the preview, that's the thumbnail that's sitting over here. When I look at this thumbnail, I know the thumbnail well enough. I know the problem that's come up in here well enough to know what's going on. So I'm just going to show you all the consequence of this. I'm going to load this thing as a selection, so I'm simply going to hover over the thumbnail of the Coca-Cola, hold down my command key, click. It loads it as a selection. I'm going to come over here and add a blank layer to the top, and then black is my foreground color. I'm just going to fill this selection with black. The thing about it is, though, if you take a look at this, what is selected? Is it the Coca-Cola that's selected, or is it the background that's selected? You would never know the difference unless you look, and you can actually see marching ants going around the edge of this outside of this image. So when I fill this with black, this is what happens. Sorry. And so you can see I've got a serious problem here. I could have just inverted the selection here to get around that, but the path has been created in what they call, the way you control this is referred to as path operations. Again, that doesn't make any sense to me, but nonetheless, I'm going to show you what it is and how to fix it and the way it actually should look. So anyway, the path work is great. To see what I meant by I could have just inverted that, so I'm going to go back before this thing was filled. I've still got the marching ants. In order to invert something, you cannot use Command I to invert a selection. Command I inverts an image. So for instance, if I hit Command I here, oh, I don't have anything on this. This layer that I'm working on is blank, so there's nothing to invert right now. But nonetheless, you'll just see we'll change the marching ants. To invert your selection, you have to do it via the select menu, or you need to remember this much longer keyboard shortcut. So in this case, I'm going to select invert the selection, but watch what happens. The marching ants that go around the entire border of the image will disappear. And now if I were to fill this with black, it works just the way that we thought it was supposed to work. But you don't want to have to get into that kind of complication later on. So to avoid that, we are going to go back to the original path. And the way I know something is wrong in the path here is this. Typically in the thumbnail on a path, and again, this is why I strongly suggest you guys use the bigger thumbnails for this, because if you're using that little bitty ass thumbnail, you can't really see what of this is wrong and what of this is correct. But you'll see that there's two colors here. There's actually the white, and then there's a sort of a middle gray color. The middle gray color is always supposed to represent the background, and the white is always supposed to represent what's actually the live area that's being described by your path. So if you look at this, you will think, well, that's simple, Verser, you just invert this. You can't invert a path. That doesn't work here. If I click on this thing and hit Command-I, it actually changes just the background part of this. It doesn't look at the path itself. Nothing here has changed. So that's not the solution in this. The solution is you have to go back to the pen tool, come up here to this little icon that sits right up here. If you hover over it, it'll say Path Operations. And then if you click on this drop-down menu, you'll see that there's 5 possible versions in here. I don't know what any of those 5 versions mean. All I know is I start at one and I try, and I do it to try to get this image to actually look the way it's supposed to look. And what I'm looking for is a gray background that has where there's paths are drawn on it and the interior of the path is white. So the first one I'm going to do is I'm simply going to come up here and click on Combine Shapes. Doesn't do anything. You can see nothing has changed here. I'm going to come down to the next one, which was Subtract from Front. We were already on that one, so that one's not the one. I'm going to come down to Intersect. That's not the one. And finally, Exclude Overlapping. That's not the one. And maybe I need to have this whole path selected, so let me try that. So I'm going to go back to my Path Selection tool, select across the whole thing, and we will try that again. Pen tool, up to the top, Combine Shapes, and that's it. Did you see now I've got my background is that light gray and the inside of my paths are now white. So then I can click out of this, hover over the thumbnail, command click to load this as a selection, and you see my next problem. There are now interior paths that are not connected to this. They didn't get selected in this. So I need to add those to the entire group. And if you could come in tight enough and see on this thumbnail, you would actually see that the interior of this path right here on this little baby thumbnail is still white. I need it to be gray because, again, that's supposed to be background. Does that make sense, everyone? So I am going to go back in. I'm going to hit Command. I'm going to leave this on so I know which ones to select. I'm going to grab the selection tool. I'm going to click on this path right here. I can't keep the marching ants going, so I'm going to hit Command D to deselect that. But I know it's all the interior ones. So I'm going to click on this path, hold down my Shift key, click on this path, come over here, click on this path, this one, and this one. So now I've got all of these selected, and again, I can see in my thumbnail that they are all filled solid with white, and they need to actually be that same gray background color. So then again, with them all selected, back to my pen tool, back up to this intersection part again, and I'm going to do Subtract from Front Shape. That didn't do anything for me except get rid of my selections. Sorry. Pen tool, back up to my next one down. I'm going to do a Combine Shape. That didn't do it. Subtract from Front actually did it. So now when I load this thing as a selection, you will see that everybody loads. And then I'm going to come back to my layers palette, add another blank layer up on top, and again fill it with black, and you can see it now works correctly, which has had nothing to do with the path work itself, right? I mean, I can get around all of that, but you guys just need to know that these things can crop up. To that end, there is a PDF. If you take a look at your session number 4 for this class, there is a PDF right here, Path Components, How Overlapping Paths Intersect. This is the whole thing that will walk you through all the problems. It explains it better than I explain it, but the issue that I have with this is that I think it overcomplicates things. I think I see that there's a problem. I know that it's one of 4 options that's going to fix that problem. I know what to look for. When I see it right, it's fine with me. Otherwise, you can try to go through and memorize all of this shit. Good luck. That sounded really condescending, didn't it? Didn't mean it to sound like that at all. For those of you who were still struggling with not knowing how to get rid of that second tool, again, the dialog boxes that are here are based on an older version of Photoshop. All the same stuff still exists, like the pen tool, the rubber band option exists, all that. What you don't have in here is line weight of paths, all that kind of stuff. There's just stuff has been added to this, but all of these and the instructions about how to do all of this are exactly the same. None of this has changed. So anyway, that's what you want to look like if you're struggling with that part. Yeah, and the rest, okay. I'm gonna close this up. Just because I keep humiliating Mark, I might as well make it, 100%. Oh shoot, that was the right one. Did everybody get the hard drive and get their stuff? No. So in Mark's, and again, there's nothing in the world inherently wrong with this. You can see that he actually created a new path. He saved every single path that he did. So he created the really big C to begin with and then called it C1, saved it. Then he went on to the next, created another one, saved it, all that kind of stuff. All of that's fine. There's no problem in doing that. However, if you want to put these all together to make it simpler to actually load, which is what I wanted to do, it's just a copy and paste thing. So if you click on the image that's got the part of the OCA in here, just again, Command C will copy it, go back up to C1, Command V will paste it, and then go down to low, Command C will copy it, back up, paste it. So you can rebuild the whole thing if you want to. That's all I'm saying. You can also pull things apart doing the very same thing. So for instance, I could take this path right here and do Command X. If you can't remember the keyboard shortcuts, it's off the edit menu. It's still cut, copy, and paste. That's all it is. That's all we're doing. So I can cut that image right there. I could click on a new flyout menu, say I want to do a new path. We'll just call it path 1, and then I could do a paste in that, and that would actually be pasting this down here in path 1. So, I mean, you can do all of those things. So again, the work was fine. It just took me a little while to put it together into one cohesive thing to make sure that it was done correctly. So I just wanted to point that part out. I want to look at Christina's next. So again, if we come in here and take a look at this, I'm going to actually put a couple of these together. So I'm just going to copy this and move it up into here as well. And then I'm going to grab the black path selection tool, click and drag across, so it'll show me all the points. And when I see something like this, I'm thinking to myself, oh man, this looks just... So the issue with this, if we move in, you'll see how many points that are actually going down in here. Again, the pen tool excels at being able to describe this curve. I would think that this curve right in here, you should be able to nail that with a single pair of points. But if I zoom in here to take a look at what's really going on, and then hold down again, the command key to get the white arrow and click on one, you can actually see these are all points with no handles on them at all. So basically what Christine has done is she's actually just done straight line segments all the way down. And if they're small enough and close enough to each other, they appear to be a curve, especially when you zoom out. But this is not, I mean, it's frustrating. It takes forever to do. It's way too much work, right? So again, a much better method in here. I'm going to see if I can actually get rid of a series of points here. So hold on one second. I'm going to click on this guy, hold down the shift key, and just to show you what I mean, I'm going to get rid of all of those. Pick up my path again. Here, come down to here. Again, and I've said this to you before, this seems like a straight line segment to me. I've put it in here right now, but there are very few straight line segments that exist in the real world. There are things like this that are all man-made. They have a lot of straight lines, but what in nature has a straight line? I mean, there are things, don't get me wrong, but there's not many of them. So for me, I put just the smallest amount of curve in there, even though it doesn't really need it. It's just to keep it from looking like, oh, you can spot straight lines. So that gives me a little bump right there. I'm going to come back over. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see this a little bit better. Ooh, too much better. Hold down my option key, click to get rid of the second handle, and then I'm going to just come up here. I'm not going to be too greedy about this, but I'm just going to click and describe all of that in a single point. Now this point is slightly off, so again, if you hold down your command key, you'll temporarily get the little white guy, and you can actually move this and then let go, and this is exactly what I want to do. I'm hover over that, hold down the option key, and click to get rid of that point. And then finally close my path with a little, so I can do this in 2 points as opposed to a lot of points. Anyway, questions about that? So that's one extreme. I'm going to show you Chloe's next because this is going to the other extreme. Is it better that I announce that I'm going to show your work before, or I just let it happen and you go, oh no? I'm just kidding. So again, in Chloe's case, I'm going to select this. If you take a look at this, things look pretty good. There's some, it could be it could be tweaked in a little bit more. I'm going to actually show you the points though. And you can see in here that she's been really aggressive with the least number of points possible. No, and I love that part. But sometimes you're biting off too many chunks, right? So you lose little nuances like this. A point in between here would have just made describing that arc easier for you. It's not, you can spend time with it. You could still keep just the same number of points you have and probably take a little bit more time and dial this in. But sometimes it's easier for me. So again, the trick in doing this is that don't try to do too large of an arcs in this. It doesn't mean that the tool can't do it. It just means that you're going to spend more time sort of like going back and forth and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I want to avoid that part. Okay, almost through all of this. Well, I say that, that's actually not true. I want to look at Malia's next. So this is just something that I pick up only because I've worked with this tool for so long and done so much of this kind of editing. I'm going to click and drag across and show you a bunch of points right here, and I'm trying to figure out, oh, it's like right here. This is a good one right here. You can see, you can sort of spot it. You see how this thing has got this sort of like weird little, I'm going to actually turn off the layer mask, or turn off the outline so you can see it. See this little twist right here? There's another small little twist right here. Again, if I hold down the command key and get the white arrow and click on this, you can see that super short little handle right there. If you're doing a lot of super short little handles, you're doing something wrong. So it's not, I mean, there's maybe one or two occasions in your whole life where it will actually mean something, whatever. But in this case, it doesn't. It's not actually helping you at all. You can still edit after the fact. So now that I've got the white arrow selected, I can click on this point and I can actually re-edit it. And I am actually going to pull that little divot right out of it and let go. And you're fine. You're off to the races. So again, you can go back in after the fact and fix small little things. But again, I would caution you to have it be correct when you make it. If you make a mistake while you're drawing your path, go back and use history to go back to undo that. Don't try to change points. Don't try to select points and get rid of them. That's just a world of hurt. But if you've done something like this and it's really, here, there's another one that's sitting right here. And it's the same trick. I can click on this and actually drop the line back down so that it doesn't have that little bump in it. So you can do that stuff, but my feeling is that it means that you're going to have to go through your path twice. I see people demo the path pen tool all the time, and they say, oh, just get really close, just be really random and fast with it, and then go back and redo it all. And it's like, why on earth would you do something twice? That can't be efficient in time. It just can't. So anyway, just for what that's worth. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of our first composites. I know you guys sound really excited about that. Okay, I'll look at Kirsta again. So this part was extreme. I'll show you the things that I look for and the things that I think about in here. The first thing I look for is this, what on earth happened to her skin, right? And it isn't a problem with any of the work. The issue is that it's where the layer that had the profile on it got brought into this image. And you can see it got brought in underneath. This shade adjustment layer right here is supposed to be impacting the metal background, not the figure. So the figure just got brought in on the lower one. So the trick to this is, if you have this gradient layer selected when you pull in any image or any other layer, it's going to go between these two. If you want it to go on the top, which is where you want it to go, make sure that you've always got your top layer selected. And you would think that was the only person who did this. I saw probably 4 or 5 of these done exactly the same way. So for what it's worth. Again, for me to simply move the layer up to the right place in the stack is no big deal, but I just think you guys need to be aware of those things, okay? Alrighty. So, the biggest problem, and again, the challenge of this, so as long as you've gone 2 for 2, you might as well go 3 for 3. So when I go to look at these things, these are the first things that I look at. So my first move right here is to simply look at the path palette, and I don't see a path. So Mark did all of this work to generate the path for this face, but then when he took the face then he actually created a layer mask, put the layer mask onto the layer, then drug the entire layer over to the metal background. He left his path back in the original profile image. Does that make sense, everyone? And that's catastrophic, because at that stage of the game, he doesn't have his path anymore, right? This is the final image right now, and the path does not exist in this. So we need to manage that. Now, again, Mark, if you think you're the only one who did this, you would be wrong. More than half this class did this. I mean, it's like this. It's one of my copy and paste comments in the section. You orphaned the path, because I don't want to type that shit out. I've told you guys right now, I type 30 words a minute, and with like 30%, 50% mistakes. Yeah, it's just, anyway. And now you can actually dictate into Canvas directly, so I can speak stuff. But then I get all flipped out about speaking, because so I'll say like, okay, so you orphan the, so no, and then I got to go in and edit that. So what the hell was that? Anyway. Okay. So that's the first thing I look at. The second thing I look at is this. I'm going to zoom into the edge right here. And I take a look at this edge right here, and what I'm looking for is I want to make sure that it's not too sharp. So this is another thing that about at least half of you guys did, is that you created your pencil, so you did your path selection, which was fine. You loaded it as a selection, which was fine. You loaded that layer, the selection then as your layer mask, which is not fine, because the problem that you run into with that is that the edge needs to be softened. The edge is too sharp. But again, if I come over to marks and I hover over the thumbnail of the mask and I hold down my option key, I can look at it and I can see there's a small blur in here. So I know he softened this edge, which makes the composite work. It doesn't look like you just cut something out. I'm going to find somebody in here really quickly who actually did one that's cut out, and I'll show you what I mean. Yes, I'm going to show you in 1 second. Yeah, I'm going to get to another one. When I find another one in here that does not have a softened path, I'll show it to you. And the next one I want to show you right now, again, is Christina's. Again, Christina, more than half the people in this room did this exact same thing. You're just the first one in line. Sorry. What's wrong with this image? You should be able to spot it from here. This does not have a layer mask on it. This has got nothing but transparency. So what she did was she created a layer mask for this. Again, she's orphaned her path, so her path is still back in the profile image, but she made the selection from the path, created a layer mask, put it on here, and then applied that layer mask, which removed the background of this. And the issue about that is that this is a destructive move, and there is no recovering. How do I recover from this? I do not have a virgin copy of this profile in here. If this is all I get back from a retoucher, I'm fucked. I can't change this. I can't modify it. I simply have to accept it. So I can recreate the mask that she actually put on here. So to do it, you simply hover over the thumbnail of the image, hold down the command key, control click to load it as an image, and then I can actually add this as a layer mask. So this is what her mask looked like. I've just built it off of the thing that got removed. And I'm going to take a look at this, and you can see what I mean about an image edge that is too sharp. This looks like it got cut out. Does that make sense, everyone? This needs to be softened up. Now, the trick that I've showed you is based on how Photoshop used to function, and it still works perfectly well. Again, you load your path as a selection, you go up to the select menu, you come down to modify. I don't have the selection going. I'll show it to you in just a second. You add a little bit of feathering, and you use that to apply as your layer mask. But what's happening here is that it's starting out with an image that's got a full background, and then basically with the mask on it, for some reason, I don't know who the fuck is teaching this in Photo Practice 3, but again, you are not the only person to do this. Half this class did this, right? Then you grab the layer mask and you remove it by dragging it down to the trash, and you get this thing that comes up, and it says, do you want to apply the mask? And if you say yes to that, it removes all of the background. I mean, it gets rid of it. That is a destructive move. We can't recover from that. So I said, for everyone who did this, and I was not being snarky, although I really felt bad at the end of the day, so I'm thinking, God. So I just want you to know. So anyway, to everyone who did this, I sent this thing, what about, did you not read in the assignment? Only because if we take a look at the assignment, See this giant ass in all caps text that sits right here? That's what I just copy and pasted. But again, I have to admit to all of you, it was done with the love of my heart. It was just, I think, a little bit of snarkiness would hopefully impress upon you how important it was to never apply a mask for any reason. There is simply no reason. I say that. There are a couple of occasions you're going to see later on where you will see something that looks sort of similar to it. But again, in this case, there's simply no reason to do it. Because if all of a sudden you get it back and let's say you do a giant print of it and you look at it and you think, oh my God, I missed a whole area right by her tooth, or oh my God, I missed I cut in a little bit too much here, or what. You can't go back and redo this without finding the original file with the original path and then creating another selection and then bringing it in and blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense, everybody, what's going on? Okay. So really quickly though, Photoshop has added a new feature that allows you to do this feathering after the fact. So I want to show that to you right now. So I'm going to hit delete on that. We're going to do the same thing again here just so that you can see what it looks like. So I'm going to load this as a selection. I'm going to add it as a layer mask. So this is what our layer mask looks like, and you can see it's too sharp. However, if you select the layer mask, Properties now allows you to adjust the properties of your mask. This didn't used to exist. It used to be when you would select on the layer mask, you would still just get the properties of the image part. But when you click on this now, that changes. And one of the things that you have now is feathering. So I'm going to show you just the mask. This is what it looks like right here. If we grab this feathering right here and crank it up, you will see that it softens this edge. So one of the advantages of doing it this way is that you can actually watch your amount of feathering in relationship to your background. So you can watch your composite in real time. Before, you had to guess at the feathering and is it too much, is it too little, whatever. This way, you just know. Make sense? We're going to talk about vector masks here in just a little bit too, and that's going to play a role in all of this as well. Okay. I do not need to save that. We're going to look at Gemma's next. So what do you notice about this layer right here? Does this look like a layer mask? It looks like a weird layer mask. In truth, this is a vector mask. And don't let vector freak you out. The word vector, all it refers to really is the path. So this is now a mask that has been created directly using the path. This does not have any pixel part in it. So for instance, if I click on this mask right here and put my little cursor around here, and I'm going to hit the B key. If I paint now, I can only paint on the image itself. I can't paint on this part. So you'll see if I do something like this, it only happens on this part. This is a mask that is created by the points that exist right here. So these points are the same as this part right here. To show you how that really works, if I click on this, you're not going to see it. Well, you'll see this part. Again, the same trick holds true. If I hover over this, hold down the shift key and click, I'll put a bracket on it, and you can see it actually gets rid of that part. But if I undo that and I'm going to get rid of everybody else, so I'm going to hold down my option key and just click on the eyeball so I lose everybody else. Again, you can see that this vector mask is too sharp. Look at this edge. I mean, it looks completely cut out. But again, in working in a mask here, you have a feathering option. Now, in theory, this is impossible. This is actually an illusion. This is not what's really happening. It's an illusion. It's one of those things that Photoshop does. A vector is actually a mathematical line, which is what a path is. It's a description of points and connection points, or connection segments between those points, but it's a mathematical description. If you were to really look at the math behind a path, it's just this giant-ass long equation that describes where all of those points should be, where the handles, how long the handles are, where the arc is. I mean, that's all it is. That's why you can scale paths up and down. That's why they use paths to describe all the type that you use in Photoshop, is so that you can scale non-destructively. So you can make a font really big and then make it really small and make it really big and make it really small. You can keep doing that back and forth. It's non-destructive because it's a mathematical equation, and you're just saying, yeah, make that equation bigger, make it smaller, make it bigger, but there's no destruction in there, unlike when you transform pixels and you make pixels larger and smaller and larger and smaller. You really degrade the quality of those pixels when you do that. So at any rate, in theory, you should not be able to feather a selection that's based on a mathematical equation. So this is an illusion. It works, but that's what's going on in here. And you can see, you can really crank this up. I mean, you can make it gets really super soft. So anyway, vector masks are fine to use. I'm going to show you how to use them, why to use them in just a second. But at any rate, so this works. The only issue that I've got with this, again, is it simply needed to be softened up a little bit, and the only way you can soften up a vector mask is to do that. So to show you also what I'm talking about here, no, we'll save that. We'll let everybody do it. Okay, that part's good. So this is one issue that we've got with vector masking. The orphan pass is another issue that we've got, and I'm going to show you one final one in here just in a second. And then we're going to actually work on one of these images. So I'm going to go back to Kirstis here, and I want to take a look at the body. And so in this case, things were done correctly. The path is actually sitting right here. Again, so in the way most people work is they would do the pen work on the body figure. So you open up the body image, you do the path work on the body image, just make that selection to do all that kind of stuff, whatever. And then instead of taking that body and moving it over to the metal background, you do the opposite. You take the metal background and you move it over to the body image, and that way you keep the path. Does that make sense, everyone? But sometimes that's not possible to do. And it gets worse. In this case, I'm going to actually show you the path. I'm going to click on this guy, and you can see now that in this case, the path is no longer in register with the body. There are other cases where the body gets giant, where somebody tries to rescale the body, and you lose the relationship, the connection of that to the path, which is horrible, because if you've spent, the 20 minutes to build your path, you don't want to just use it once and then lose the ability to ever use it again. Does that sort of make sense? Okay, so what I would like to do with that really quickly, just to make sure that everybody's good on this part, and make sure I'm not doing something else in here. Yeah, what I would like to do is do a quick one of these from scratch. We're going to do the version of the profile. So I'd like you to, if you've got your own version of your profile, I'd like you to start it from scratch again. It's not that hard to outline the profile. We can do it really quickly, and then we're going to move it over to the we'll move it over to the metal background, and I'll show you all the tricks that you need to know about regular pixel masking, vector masking, all of that kind of stuff, and hopefully we'll be done with this part of it. Are we fair game on that? Okay. I'm going to close this up, so I need everybody to go back to the assignment file in week number 4, session number 4. And open up the metal and the profile both. So I'm just going to select both of them. And then I'm going to just create my path. So I've got the profile is going to be in the front. That's where I'm going to actually start. Again, because my path is going to have to start outside of my image, and it's also going to be end outside of my image. So, and the minute I see that, I go to the pasteboard. So hit the F key once, then hit the P key to get the pen tool. Then if you hold down your spacebar and your command key, you'll get the magnifying glass temporarily, and you can move in. I just start at the lower shoulder. I don't, some people, for me, I just always start at the bottom and work my way up to the top and back around down to the bottom again. You can start really anywhere you want, but this is how I'm going to do it. So again, with the pen tool selected, just to make sure, really quickly, P key up on the very top in your options bar that you do have path is selected, not shape. Then over where the little gear is in the options bar, again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up at my screen really quickly, click that little gear, and in the drop-down menu, you want to make sure that rubber band is selected, and then finally, you want to put a check mark in the auto add and delete. This is how you will always say, you don't ever change this. The only time I ever change anything in here is that if you go to the gear thing again, you can actually change the color of your path. And the only reason you would do this is that, for instance, right now, if we were working on a predominantly blue image, I wouldn't be able to see the path because the path line is colored blue. So I would click on that drop down and I would make it red if I was going to do working on a blue background or some other color. So anyway, that would be the, and then the thickness, although I never changed the thickness of my path line. I'm not really sure why people would, but again, I guess it's not me, but as people get older, they have trouble seeing. So anyway. All right, so this is set up for me correctly, so I'm simply going to start. So I need everybody just to outline the front of this girl's face. And again, as few lines as you can do to get it. And then just really quickly take a peek up here at my screen. You can see I've done the entire line around here. Then, because I am on the pasteboard, I'm just putting points out here on the background. Photoshop will know how to deal with these points in the background. So you don't need to trace the edge of it and then just finish your path. Oh, this is interesting on mine because there's another fuck up on mine. So I'll give you a few more minutes to finish it up. How you guys doing? Are you close? I'll wait. Let me know when you're done-ish. All right, that's creepy. This little camera just started moving. Huh. All right, are we good-ish? Everybody feeling good? Okay, so your first move right off the bat is to go over and save the path. So again, I'm gonna come over here. There's two ways to do it. Number one, you can double click on it, because again, right now it's called work path. So if I start another path after unselecting this one, is unselecting a word? Deselecting this one? After deselecting this one, if I start another one, I'm going to lose all the work that I just did. I want to make sure I save it. So you can use the drop-down menu that's to the right of the tab path. Click on this and do Save Path. Or you can simply double-click on the word Work Path and it'll open up a dialog box and you can name it and I'll call it Face. Yeah. It should. You got the same problem I've got. So what part is yours look mine or different? Yeah, so again, hold that thought because that's my next move. But again, before I start screwing around with anything, I want to save the path because that took me, 3 minutes to do, and that's a very precious 3 minutes for me. So, but Chloe brings up a perfect example here, and looking at this is actually incorrect. Again, you want the white area to be what, if you were to load the path as a selection, what would actually be filled. If I load this thing right now as a selection and fill it, what's going to be filled is the background and not the face, right? So if I treat this and I use this to create my pixel mask, it's going to hide the face and show the background. And again, I can do all sorts of inversions to fix that part, but it's just simpler to get this correct to begin with. So again, it's one of these operations up at the top. So if you come up to that little icon that's up at the very top. So what we're talking about, guys, if you've got a gray face and a white background, it's wrong. If you have a gray background and a white face, it's correct. How many people have the gray background and white face? See, it's like everybody. How many have what I have? Don't I feel special? Because this was set up when I tried to actually fix the last problem, this thing stays sticky. So that's why. So at any rate, I'm going to then change this. I'm going to try, I think it's an exclude one. That's not it. Combine shape. So that's it. It's the very first one up at the top, combine shape. And now you can see that this part is correct. Make sense? Okay, so I am going to load this as a selection. We're going to do this two ways. The first thing we're going to do is just hover over the thumbnail, hold down the Command key or Control key if you're on Windows, click, and it loads as a selection. And remember, this is what I was saying about it understands, Photoshop understands that those points that are going on the outside don't necessarily apply to my image. Then I'm going to go back to my Layers palette, and I'm simply going to add this as a layer mask on this. So I'm going to just click on Add Layer Mask. And you can see at this stage of the game now it has actually softened this part. I mean, it's actually hiding the background, but it hasn't removed the background. So I'm going to do Command J on this now to just make a copy so that you guys can see what it is I'm talking about. I'm going to turn off my bottom layer right here so that what we're looking at is just this top layer. If you actually take your layer mask now and drag it down to the trash, you will get this thing that opens up and it says, do you want to apply this layer mask? Do you want to delete it? Or do you want to cancel this whole operation? In my book, personally, I feel like delete should be the option and apply should be the second one, because most people, when they do this move, they want to simply delete the mask. They don't want to apply it. So if you delete the mask, you can see it just goes away and nothing changes. If you hit Command Z to bring it back and then throw it away again another time, and then you hit Apply instead, you can see it physically removes that part of the background. That is a destructive move. And so if I have a problem that I discover later on in my editing, that there is an issue between the transition between her face and the background, whatever, that I would like to go in and fine tune and fix, I cannot do it anymore because my background is gone. And if you had taken this image and then drug it over to the metal background as is, you would have lost this virgin copy of the image right here, and you would have lost the path as well. Does that make sense what's going on and why we don't want to do that? All right, so That being said, I'm going to throw away that copy of the profile. I don't need it. I've still got the one that I'm actually looking for here. I'm going to turn its eyeball back on. Then if we actually zoom in here to take a look at this guy, you can see that the edge is too sharp in here. It's just, it looks like it's been cut out with an X-Acto knife. So my option now at this stage of the game, because I didn't feather it to begin with, my option now is to feather it now. So if you click on the layer mask, and you will see that it is a mask where you've got white and black. The black is actually hiding the background. The white is actually showing the face. But now if you click on the mask, you have this feather option up here in your properties panel. And you can click on that and scooch this over just a little bit, just to soften that edge slightly. Yes? You're looking at your mask.
Oh, yeah, just invert it. You've got a selection going. Hit Command Z to undo it. Yeah, and then Command D, you've got a selection going. There, and then put it in there.
Oh.
So that's one way to do it. The way we have typically done it, go ahead and throw your mask away, the one that we've got here. The way I showed you guys to do it before, and delete it, don't apply it. The way I showed you before was to hover over again the face, the path, hold down the Command key, load as a selection, and then up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather. And again, I'm going to put in 1 pixel feather on this, and we'll see what it looks like. And then I'll go back to my layer and add that as a layer mask. And now you can actually see I've still got a much softer edge there now because I've feathered that selection. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Make sense? So now that you've got the feathering done, you just apply it as a layer mask. Right? And it's a little bit softer. So this part's working out pretty well, but what I don't have in here is, this is a problem. Here, I'll just show you what the problem is. So I'm going to double click on the hand. Right now I want to scale this thing. So I'm going to select my entire image, so this bottom layer. I want to put this on a white background just because I don't want this to be my background layer. So I'm going to duplicate this. I take it back, I'm not going to duplicate it. I'm going to simply add a solid color above this. So come down to the bottom of your layers palette. It's the circle that's half black and half white. Those are all your adjustment layers. If you click on it and come up to the very top and click on solid color, we are going to make white as our solid color adjustment layer. Because my foreground and background colors are black and white, if you take your cursor away from the foreground, from the color picker, you'll get an eyedropper tool, and you can come over and you can simply click on the background color that is white. It's just a fast way to load it. Otherwise, you can type in the values, 255 red, 255 green, 255 blue, and say OK. Or if you know hex colors, you can type in 6Fs. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say OK to that. But now this is on top of my image. I want the image on top of this white background. So I'm going to click on my image, the bottom layer, drag it up to the top till you see the little blue line that sits right above this, and then let go. And now I've got my new image that's on top of a white background. That's all I did. Everybody good on this part? Okay. So now I want to scale this image. I'm going to transform it. So to transform the image, make sure that you've got the top layer, the figure, the face layer selected. Hit Command T, that brings up the transform dialog box. The options are up at the very top. And you can see you've got a width and a height that's up at the very top with a chain link between the two. So again, if you have your preferences set the way I set mine, when you go into transform, the ratio between width and height is not locked together. In the newest versions of Photoshop, if you have not said you want to use legacy behavior, they're already locked together. Either way, holding down the Shift key will do the opposite. So in my case right now, mine are unlocked. So if I move the width, that's the only thing that will change. So it will distort my image. If I move the height, that's the only thing that'll change. it will distort my image. If I have them locked together by either clicking on that chain link that I just showed you, the one I'm pointing to right here, or holding down the shift key, then when you change the width, the height will change correspondingly, and the image will get larger or smaller, but it will not get distorted. Make sense? So for me, I don't like the new behavior. Again, I've already told you this. We are going to run into a problem using the new behavior, that new scaling behavior, when we go to try to scale in perspective. So until Photoshop figures a way to fix that, I stick with the old version of this. But regardless, for this right now, I'm going to click on the chain link between the width and the height. I'm going to hover my cursor over the H or the W, doesn't matter which one. You'll get the scrubby slider. It's the hand that's got two arrows that are pointing right and left. If you then click and move it to the left, it will make things smaller. And you'll see in my case, that link, somehow I either clicked on it a second time. It did not lock. So right now you can see my width is 100%, but my height is only 70. It's crushing this, it's distorting it. But you can click on the chain link after the fact as well. So I'm going to click on the chain link, and it just makes the image smaller. And I'm going to continue to crank it down till it's about 50%, roughly 50%. To go ahead and commit the transform, click on the check mark that's up at the very top in the options bar all the way on the right hand side. So now we've actually got a smaller image, and if again the image itself is smaller, which is great, if you hold down the option key and you click on your mask, you see that the mask was made smaller as well. So the mask was transformed along with the image. And the reason that happened is if you look right between the mask and the image, you'll see that there is another chain link right there. And what that is saying is that as long as you've got this thing locked down, when you change one of those elements, you will change the other one. Does that make sense, everyone? So you'll see what I mean. Hit Command Z to undo that. Go ahead and click on your image again. And now in this case, I'm going to unlock the chain link. So I clicked on, again, the link that's between the image and the mask. I've undone that part. I've actually got my figure selected, not the mask, but the figure, and I'm going to do that same transform. Command T. Click on the link between width and height and use your scrubby slider to crank it down to 50. And what you'll actually see is the mask does not change. Only the pixel image changes because I broke that link between the two of these. So now it's completely out of register. The mask is actually showing part of the background because the figure is so much smaller than the mask was. Does that make sense, everyone? Are we good on this part? All right. I'm going to hit the circle up at the top with the slash through it to undo it. So I'm going to put the link back between those two. So I want to then transform the whole thing one more time again. So I've relinked my mask and my figure. Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. Click on the link between width and height. Drop it down to only 50%. And life is great here. So go ahead and check OK for the. Click on the check mark to say OK, but then go back to your path and click on your path and then click on it to actually make it active. And you can see that your path is no longer in register with the figure because I made the figure smaller, but I never made the path smaller. Is this making sense, everybody, what's going on? Okay, so how do we fix all of this? This becomes a problem. How do we move stuff and still keep the path? How do we do all of those things? So this is how you do it. If you go back in history to undo that last transform, because I want to go back to where the path and the figure are actually in register with each other. So this is the trick. You need to go to your path palette. So everybody's back to having this original one, right? Okay, go to your path palette. Click on the path to make it active. You will actually see the path line running down your figure. Go back to your layers palette. Click on the pixel mask, and now we're going to add another mask. Click on add mask again, so down at the bottom of your layers palette, the square that's got the circle in it, click on this and you'll see it adds a second layer mask. So if we take a look at this, this is your second layer mask right here. So the first, if you take a, did everybody get this? Yeah, so sure, let me go back. I'm going to go back to the beginning. And let me redock my layer. Okay, so basically you've got just the regular pixel image and the pixel mask. And the reason I call this a pixel mask, if you actually select a pixel mask, hit the B key to get a brush, make sure that white is your foreground color, and paint, you can actually paint on the mask. It's made up of pixels, right? All right, Command Z to undo that. So, but now I want to add a vector mask. I want to add the actual path itself, which can function as a mask as well. So to do that, go to your path palette. You need to activate the path. You need to select on it to make it visible. You will actually see when you do that you'll see the little blue path line. It shows up. I haven't selected any points on it, but it shows up. Then go back to your layer palette, make sure that the mask itself is selected. And actually, that doesn't really matter. You could have anything on there selected, but make sure that top layer is selected. And then you're going to add another layer mask. So you click on the icon at the bottom, add layer mask, and it's going to put a second layer mask on this. And if we pull this layers to the side and take a look at it, you can see I've got a pixel content right here. I've got a pixel mask that is hiding the background, and I've got a vector mask, which is also hiding the background. So now what will happen is this: if you hold down your shift key and you click on the pixel mask, it turns it off, but now the vector mask, the mask that is made from that path, is actually doing the mask work for us. So if you zoom in really close to this face, you will see we did soften up the pixel mask, but we never softened up the vector mask. So if you hold down the shift key and let go of that, you will see that when we put the pixel mask back into effect here, hold down the shift key and click on the vector mask, you will see that we get the soft edge that we were looking for, because the mask that is controlling this now is the pixel one, which is the one we feathered. The vector mask is not doing that, because the vector mask, you cannot feather it. You can, well, I say you can't feather. You can't feather it by loading it as a selection, that kind of stuff, whatever. You need to use the properties panel to feather a vector mask. So let me go back again to my normal retouch space. So does that make sense? That's what's going on here. Okay, but this gets better. I'm going to leave my vector mask turned off. Just because I've turned it off, I prefer to use the pixel mask to do this work. But I want to save the vector mask with this layer so that when I transform the layer, when I move it to another image, that all of that information goes with it. So now if I actually do a transform on my image right now, so the same thing we did before, Command T to bring up the transform dialog box, click on the link between the width and height, take the height and drag it down to about 50%. Click on the check mark to say OK. Now what you will see is, if you look at that layer, you can see that not only did it make your image smaller, it made your pixel mask smaller, but it also made your vector mask smaller. So now if we go back to the path palette, so let me re-anchor here. If I go back to the path palette, you will see two paths sitting on here now. The first one is the face mask. The second one is this profile vector mask. This is the smaller baby version of it. So if you click on this right now, you will actually see, or load this as a selection, so I'm going to command click to load it, you'll see that it actually follows the line of the profile. So it was transformed as well, but it is still a path. So I'm going to hit Command D to deselect that. Grab your profile vector mask and drag it down to the icon at the bottom of the path palette that is the square with a little plus in it. It will make a copy of this, and it will actually call it profile vector copy right here. And you can see it's a mask with all of those points. So it's critical, because at any transforming that you do or manipulating whatever, it manipulates the path as well. Now my original path is not like that. If you double click on the hand to kick back out and you say show me the big ass path, okay, so I'm going to click on the original one, you can see it's no longer functioning for me because I completely changed this image. Does that make sense, everyone? But more importantly now, we need to get off of the pasteboard. if you hit the F key to go back to the black pasteboard and the F key one more time, you can actually see both of your images now. So I'm going to grab the layer mask that's got my profile in it. I'm going to drag the entire layer over on top of my metal background. I'm going to hold down the shift key because what the shift key will do is it will, whatever you're moving, it will center it. That's all it does. So it's going to put it in the middle. And you can see it brought over the pixel content, the pixel mask, but it also brought over the vector mask. If you go into your image right now to the path layer and click on that, you'll see that it brought that profile vector mask with it, and that again, I can make a copy of this so that if I do another transform, I don't lose this guy. Does this make sense, everyone, what's going on? So in working with these paths, you just need to make sure that the minute you actually do a path, if it has any meaning at all and you're going to move something, you want to attach those paths to the layer before you transform it, before you move it, so that everything is still in register and connected, so that instead of having to draw the path from scratch all over again, all you need to do is edit it. Questions about any of this? Okay, this seems like a really good time for a break. I've got 2:19 on the clock right here. Let's make it a hard 10, guys. I'll see you back at 2:30. The file that you're working on right now, you can. It doesn't matter. It's nothing you're going to turn in for me. Okay, so did anybody try to do the assignment 5.2? That was the 3 different ways to select the girl in the background? Because I told you not to. Good. No. So, but now, say what?
For today's assignment?
It was an assignment from last week that was due today. If you did it, and I don't know how you did it because there was a whole part there's a whole method of doing that assignment that I haven't showed you yet. So you couldn't do it. So last week I said you didn't need to do it. So if you've done it, save it, redo it, whatever. But we're going to go over the 3 methods. We're going to go over what you're going to need for that assignment right now. But the most important thing I'm going to do is introduce you to our final method of selection, of building selections and selecting parts of an image. So that's going to be where we're heading right now. And then you should have all the equipment that you need to actually do the assignment, and you can just turn it in next week and it will not be late. It'll be fine. And then we will continue to move on. Okay, if you have a tablet, go ahead and plug yours in. We don't need it right here for this second part right here, but we will get to it. You should probably plan on just doing that from now on when you come to class. Just go ahead and pull your tablet out, set it up, and leave it so that we don't have to take time out in the middle of the class for you to do what you're doing right now. But that being said, I'm going to wait till you get done what you get done right now.
Do you have that little USB to USB-C?
I do. Did everybody get their stuff on the hard drive? Yes. All right. Anybody who needs stuff on the hard drive, it's on the hard drive, right? The assignments that you turned in, we all good? All right. Okay. So, I need everybody to go to our session 5 folder. So again, it's the folder from last week. We spent so much time on Sunny last week, we didn't get to this, but that's okay. I think that this gives you, instead of having to try to jam this down into your brain after going through all of the stuff we did with Sunny, this just sort of gives us a breather and a fresh start. But at any rate, if you look in your session number 5, there's a folder in here called 20100.815_V_urban_02. If you can look inside that folder. So again, look up at my screen to see where it is. everything that we're going to do now for the rest of this class, I need you guys actually doing this stuff in class. Please do not sit here and watch this stuff, because there's stuff that we're going to build that I need to have on your computer. There's all sorts of things that are going to go on today. Again, do not watch this stuff. Actually do it in class. If you get lost or I'm going too fast or something, stop me before we get in too deep so that you understand all of this stuff, and so that we don't, anyway, that's all I'm going to say about this. So anyway, if you look inside that folder, you should see 2 raw files in there. There may be XMP files in there as well. If there are, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to ask you to select both of the CR2 files. So again, select the top one, hold down your command key, select the other one. Command 0 should open them both up into Photoshop, and then ultimately into Camera Raw. So once you get into Camera Raw, it should look like this. Anybody not have this? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually use the image that has the color card in it to color balance both images. Now in my case, this has already been balanced. That's what those XMP files are about. But if you take a look at my screen right now, I'm going to throw away both of those XMP files and do the same thing again. And you will see that it's a very different story. So now my color is way off on these images. So to start off, I'm going to select the image. It does have the color card in it. On my panel, on the panels that are on the right-hand side, I'm going to go down to Color. I'm going to open up Color. And then if you look at the first thing at the very top, there's a white balance control and a little eyedropper next to it. I'm going to click on the eyedropper to actually use that to white balance my image. I'm going to zoom in on my image. So some people will actually say, well, you could hit that small patch that's right next to the, I'm going after the gray patch right next to the red. You could hit that. Did I start this video again? You could try to hit it like this. I think that's a mistake. Instead, I'm going to hold down my spacebar and command key and click on it to zoom in. And now I can not only hit this, but something else that you should be aware of, the way that this tool works, is if I click on it right now, it's going to sample a single pixel in here. You can actually say that you would prefer it to look at more of the area of this gray patch. And you do it by clicking and dragging across. And you'll see it's pulling out a box right here. And again, you don't want to touch any of the edges, you don't want to touch any of the other colors, you don't want to do any of that. But this is just saying, okay, I want you to look at more than just a single pixel on that card. I want you to look at an aggregate of that card, whatever. And it's just a little bit better option. Click on that, it will actually white balance your image. So my image is now white balanced. I'm going to go up to the thumbnail now, and you will see if you hover over to the thumbnail, up at the very top right-hand corner of your thumbnail, you'll get 3 little dots and a box with an arrow that points down. I want you to click on the 3 little dots, and you'll get a flyout menu, and you want to select all. All this is doing is selecting the other thumbnail as well. Now go back up to that same spot, the same little 3 dots, click on them again, and now select all is no longer, it's grayed out because you've selected everything. But if you come down now, sort of about a quarter of the way down to Sync Settings, click on that. It'll open up a dialog box. There's a set of canned settings that are in here. If you click on the drop down, you can see, oh, I only want to sync my white balance, or I only want to sync blah, blah, blah. The only thing that we've done in this image is white balance, so you can leave it at its default. That will include white balance. You can go up to the very top and say, I want you to sync everything, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really matter. Just as long as you get the white balance when done, you'll be fine. Click on that, and you will now see that the image without the color card is actually white balanced. So I'm going to click over on the one that's actually got the card now, so that now that's what I'm actually looking at. And I need to determine exposure about this. So I'm going to hover over this girl's body. I'm going to stay away from the shadows that are on the right-hand side of her. I'm just going to work along the body. So right now I'm in the area right between her boobs, and I'm taking a look at my histogram readout. And you can see I'm reading 30, 30, 29. I'm in that sort of low 30s, high 20s range. Is this correct? Mid-20s for my shadow detail, right? So how far away is 29 from mid-20s? Minimal. Minimal. And I could have, again, there could be a little glistening on this, whatever, but I know I've got full shadow detail in here. Hover over the area that's right under her right boob next to her underarm, that darker area right there. What are you getting up there? Yeah, so dark, right? It's going to be black in my image, but that I feel like is correct, right? What I don't know, if you go back to the image that's got the color card in it, you can hover over the white patch on the color card, and what do you see? What's your readout here? 242, 241, 242, right? What should that be? It should be 245 to 250, right? Remember when we had that whole printout that we did up here and everybody looked at it and said, oh yeah, that's where you want white detail. So my shadow detail is correct. My highlight detail is slightly a little bit under, but you should know this about this. So how many people in this room have ever developed film? Okay, so, and if you develop film, what was your developer? What developer did you use? There's a million developers out there. There's D76, there's Microdoll, there is Accufine, there is, I mean, it just, this goes on and on. There's thousands of developers. You can modify your developers. You can actually add chemistry to them to do certain things. There's a huge cornucopia, and every single one of those developers will generate a unique negative. The same thing happens in digital. Everybody thinks that this shit's all the same. I personally hate the color of skin tones in Camera Raw. I hate this. This is better than most. If I actually did a profile of this sensor, it would be even better still. But in general rule, I find Caucasian skin tones, color, not tones, but color in Camera Raw to have way too much red in them. I love skin tones in Capture One. And that's where I do a lot of my processing, just because I like the color better. But again, you need to realize that the image that you get from Camera Raw will look different than the image that you get in Capture One, because they use a different color engine. It's just like using a different developer. There's a whole cornucopia of raw file developers out there. There's Bibble, there is DxO, there is, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. All of them are going to give you a slightly different version of your file, and you find the one that you like. And Lightroom uses the same one as this, but you guys get where this is going, right? So you need to pay attention to that part. But at any rate, so I'm going to hover over this part. What I can tell you is when I shoot, I'm always making this measurement to judge my exposure, and I can tell you that if I open this file in the engine that I was using in Capture One when I made this photograph, that white patch would be reading between 245 and 250. It is slightly off now because I'm doing this processing in Camera Raw. Make sense? Okay, so I think I'm close enough, but I can find out for sure. I'm going to pull this down and I'm going to zoom into this girl's face. Yes? Yes, because that little white patch is real. It has detail in it. If you shoot a picture of this and were to print this onto a piece of paper and it was exactly the same tone as the paper base, there would be no detail in here. You would not see the separation between this and that. So because it has detail in it, I want it as white as I can get it, but still have enough tooth to it to give me detail in my file, right? So the 245 to 250 range gets me as close as I can without going over. By the time I get beyond 250, I've really started to lose any sense of detail at all, and it becomes indistinguishable from the page white of the actual physical piece of paper I'm printing on. That's why. Okay. So I'm going to look at a highlight on this girl's face. So I've just zoomed in here a little bit. I tend to try to avoid things like anywhere that I suspect there's going to be makeup on her. So that's where I'm going to do it. So, but there's a serious highlight on her nose right here. So I'm actually going to look at that serious highlight on her nose right here. So I'm just hovering my cursor over that and I'm getting a readout. And I also told you there was a quick method that you could use to check your exposure based on Caucasian skin tone. What was that? So again, all digital text that I know, myself included, this is just a way to confirm the information that you're getting off of your gray card. And what it is this. So again, this only works with Caucasian skin tone, and I wish I could say that it's somehow different. There's too much variation in African American skin tone for this to work. There's too much Asian, anything other than Caucasian skin tone. This is just where it works. So if you don't have a white person laying around that you can actually get in your frame to actually shoot this to get a measurement on this, you're out. But that's okay. You've got your gray card is doing, your color checker is doing exactly what it needs to do. But anyway, if you do have this in here, what you are looking for is a highlight on Caucasian skin tone, and you are looking to read the value of the R channel only. So if you don't remember this, now would be a really good time to write this one down, that the R value of a properly exposed image falls somewhere between 225 and 245. My typical target is 235 for the R channel. It's a little bit brighter. Most people would say that a 225 in the R channel looks normal. A 235 is a little, got a little more energy to it. It's popped open a little bit, it's opened up a little bit, whatever. 245, you are hitting your limit. That's where I actually will take somebody if I've got a beauty skin that I've got a lot of problems with. I'm trying to blow stuff out is what I'm really trying to do without losing detail. I can't afford to just nuke something out. Make sense? So in this case, you can see I've got an R channel of 242. So this is reaching my threshold, and I'm going to accept that. So now this is a balancing act. Right? Does that make sense? My card's reading a number too low. My skin tone highlight is a 1 or 2 high, whatever. This is perfect exposure, guys. Make sense? All right. So I can go back to my original image. Down here, it's already had that applied to it, and I'm simply going to open this as an object. So I'm going to click on this. It'll open up. Oh, I just opened mine up in 16-bit because I've been working with you guys. I don't want this to be in 16-bit. You can see my readout down here is 16-bit, as is the version up at the very top. So I'm going to go to my layers palette. I'm going to double click on the smart object. I'm going to then click open the link at the bottom of my page and change this back to 8-bit, still Adobe RGB, and say OK, and then say OK again. Yeah, and it's not going to let me change my bit depth. So I'm going to start this all over again really quickly. You don't need to start yours all over again really quickly. I'm going to also get rid of all the other backgrounds that we were using. This will only take me a second to get right back there. I've already made XMP files of it now, so then I can just click on this bottom one and open this up as a smart object, and I should be good to go. Boom, 8-bit right there, and also 8-bit confirmation. If we take a look up in the title, if I drag this to the side, you'll see there's an 8-bit right there. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to actually separate this girl from the background. So for me, this is a large part of the work that I do. This is green screen. Chroma key is another way people will actually talk about this kind of work. You can do this with blue screen as well. As a matter of fact, you can use any screen color that you want. The reason that most people use green screen is it is as opposite from Caucasian skin color as you can get. So there's also a blue version of this. You'll hear people talk about blue screen as well. That's also extremely distant from Caucasian skin tone. In theory, you could use any color to be your background color and separate from it. But in this case, green is really sort of the standard in the industry. So with all the work that I was doing in green screen, I actually had a program. I bought a $500 program that actually would do these knockouts for me. So again, the term knockout is to separate this girl from the background, right? And it worked out really well for a while, but then I actually saw a demonstration that was done by a retoucher in New York, a guy named Chris. I'm not going to remember Chris's last name. Anyway, about a different way to employ a really old tool in Photoshop to sort of give me the same kind of result, actually a better result than I was getting with the $500 program. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that so that you don't have to go out and buy that $500 program. Isn't that nice? I know. So my mother-in-law would say that that you guys have just, I've invested in you. And anyway, no. My mother-in-law, she bought 2 chaise lounges once in her life, whatever, and she looked at me and she said, these are an investment. And it was like, the woman had no money at all. She could not, if a penny came in, she spent a dime. I mean, it was just, she just never had any money at all, whatever. But I loved it. She was like, this is an investment. So, yeah, so consider this an investment. All right, so anyway, I've completely lost my mind, I think, sometimes. All right, so to do this, how many of you guys in this room have ever used actions in Photoshop? Okay. The thing about actions in Photoshop are, if there's anything that you are going to do more than once, it probably makes sense to create an action out of it, because the action then will do all the work for you. You simply play it. You don't have to go through the whole process. So we are going to, again, we're going to build an action that's going to then separate this person from the background. So that's where we're going to start with this whole process. Okay, so to do that, you need to click on your action tab. So if you go over to your history palette, it's the tab that's located with it. Click on that. You will then have a flyout menu. If you look up at my screen, you'll see that I've got tons of actions in mine. You are not going to have anywhere near this number. If you've never done any of these, all you're probably likely to have are the default actions. So if you click open this, you'll see that there's a little collection. Does everybody have a default action? If you open it up, there's a half dozen actions and there's something in there that are all ones that Photoshop has built. And you could use them, but anyway, we're gonna make our own, because this is, again, a custom action to actually do this. So to do it, if you come over to the little menu item that's to the right of the tab that says action and click on it, you'll get a flyout menu, and what you want to do is select new action. So take a look at my screen to see where I'm at. So again, the 3 little menu items that are to the right of the tab, this is action. Click on that, you'll get a flyout menu, and you want to bring this up and call it new action. And in this case, we are going to name it 0 selective color. Now that's a very long name, so what I typically do, we'll type in 0 SEL color. It stands for 0 selective color. Now, I have got multiple. If you take a look at my screen, you're not going to do this because you don't have more than one action. I mean, more than one set. If you take a look at my sets, you can actually sort your actions so that if you use only certain actions for retouching, you can put it in your retouching action group. If you do it only for painting, you could have actions for your painting group. You can make some order out of the chaos. That's all that's really going on here. If you want to do that, you actually then have to create a new folder for that first. We don't have that, but we're just going to put yours into your default folder anyway. So everybody's got this thing named 0 selective color, right? Okay, do not do this. I'm going to add number 89 to mine because I've got 3,000 copies of this action and I want to know the latest one, so I've just picked a random number. All right, so, and then you'll see that there is a record button. Click on the record button. So what Photoshop now does is it watches every single thing that you do and it records it into a programmable action. So that once we're finished doing that, when you click on the button, it will do the work immediately, really quickly, and you'll have to do it again. Everybody good on that part? All right, so the first part in building our action is that we are going to come over to our layers palette. We are going to add an adjustment layer. So again, the circle at the bottom that's half black, half white, click on that, and you are going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer on top of this. So again, look up at my screen to see where I'm at. We're going to add a hue saturation layer to this. So that's our first move. We're going to go right back to the exact same spot. We're going to add another adjustment layer on top of our hue saturation layer. So click on that. You'll get a flyout menu. And if you can't see the entire thing, just bring your cursor up a little bit so that you can see the very bottom. We need the very bottom adjustment layer, the one that says selective color. Can everybody find selective color? So click on that, it will open up selective color, and then up in your properties panel, you'll actually see what you've got. Now in my case, I have got my absolute radio button selected. That's the one that you want. If you have relative selected, you need to click over and do absolute now. If you have absolute, don't change it because it can get funky with the way actions are recorded. So again, make sure that absolute is selected. And so what this dialog is for, this is actually a tool. This goes back to the very beginning of Photoshop. This was one of the very first adjustment layers. This actually existed before adjustment layers. What this was designed to do is it was designed for people who were actually working on an offset press to adjust the information that would create the plates to actually do the printing on the press. So what it allowed them to do was to go in and pick either the cyan, magenta, yellow, or black plate and control how much of ink actually was put into that plate. And it's not just the ink, they could actually control elements of that ink that would go into that plate, which is way more information than any of you want to know. That is not what we do with this thing anymore. You guys are very unlikely to end up in a press house ever trying to control plate densities using this. But we can leverage this completely. But the reason I say that is that we are going to screw around with our printing plates, the plates that would make up this image. So to start with, you will see that there's a drop-down menu at the very top that says Colors. If you click on that, you will see you have reds, yellows, greens, cyans, blues, magentas, whites, neutrals, and blacks. We're going to start with the reds to begin with. And what you want to do is, the very bottom of this, you've got a black slider. So we're in all the moves that we make in this particular action, you're going to ignore cyan, magenta, and yellow. You are only going to work with the black. And you're going to take the black slider, the little triangle that's underneath that, and you're going to drag it all the way to the right. And you will see that it says 100%. And if you also take a look at the girl's face, you can see in this girl's face, it just got dirty. What I'm saying to Photoshop that I want to do, and it's important that you understand how this tool is working, because you can use it for things other than making selections of green backgrounds. So what I just said was that any red that is in this image, I want to fill it with black ink, 100% black ink. So all the reds that exist in this image just went black. Now there's a lot of other detail in her. There's a lot of yellows and oranges and that kind of stuff that are in her, so you still see some of her face. But we're going to do this now for every single color and every single tone. So you're going to now go to the next drop-down color, yellows, and you are going to drag the black slider at the bottom all the way to the right. And you will see her face just got a little bit dirtier, because now what we're saying is that we want all the yellows in this image to be black. Then we're going to go to the next one down, the greens, drag it all the way, the black slider all the way to the right, down to the cyans, black slider all the way to the right, blues, black slider all the way to the right, magentas, black slider all the way to the right. Then I get to whites are the next. So what you need to think about here is, again, it's I think mislabeled. This really should be highlights, midtones, and shadows, but they call it whites, neutrals, and blacks. But what we're really talking about here are highlights, midtones, and shadows. So go ahead and select the whites, drag that black slider at the bottom all the way to the right. Next one down, the neutrals, black slider all the way to the right. And then finally the blacks at the very end, slider all the way to the right. And your image should be black. Because what we just did was we said we wanted to fill every single color with black and every single tone with black. So we now end up with a black image. Did that work for everyone? Does anyone have a weird solarized kind of looking image? I'll show you what that looks like once we finish making the action, and what the problem is and how to fix it. So at this stage of the game, this is our action. We've done it. It's exactly what we want. Come over to your actions palette, and down at the very bottom, you will see that there's a little red dot. That little red dot at the bottom is an indication that you are actually recording right now. If you look just to the left of that little red dot, there's a little white square. If you click on that, it stops your action. And then you will actually see in your actions panel, there is an action called Zero Selective Color. Does everybody have this? If you look under it, you will actually see the steps that this action made. When you use actions, the thing that can trip you up is that there's a lot of people who will open up this Zero Selective Color set and then pick the first layer underneath it and run the action from there. That does not work. You run the complete action itself. You run the parent. Does that make sense, everyone? So come over to your image now, and you are going to throw away both of those adjustment layers and find...
Stop
Yeah, I said click on the white button to stop your action. Make sure that you've got the parent selected. I got rid of my 2 layers here. And then if you look at the bottom of your actions panel, there's a little arrow that points to the right. Click on that. And it should give you your action. It should build those layers for you again. Now in my case, this happens all the time. I get this solarized looking thing. And that is because it did not remember that this action was set to absolute. And so it's now reselected it to relative. All you need to do is click on absolute and you get back to where you need to be. So does everybody have a black screen now? The whole thing? Okay, so I'll get rid of all these layers. And then over in your action palette, do you have a 0 selective color action? Click on the parent. Again, you don't want to start the action. You want to click on the parent. And then at the icon at the bottom of your actions palette that's an arrow pointing to the right, click on it. It should have built all that stuff for you. How many times do you want to do that slider work with the black slider over and over and over again? Nobody wants to do that shit, right? And again, for me, just click on absolute. It gives me a complete black image. Does that make sense to everyone? Are we good on this part? Okay, so then here's the trick. We are going to go in our drop-down colors and we're going to go back up to greens. And we're going to take the greens and we are going to take the black slider. So again, what this has said is that I want to fill the greens with black ink completely. But if you drag the slider back into the middle, what you're saying now when it gets zeroed out is that you don't want to do anything to the greens. But then if you drag it all the way to the left, now what you're saying is that you'll see, I want to fill this with the minus 100% black, which is essentially white ink. So again, white ink is something that exists in printing, but it's a special plate for it. But the idea of white ink exists in Photoshop. It's just a mathematical number. It's the opposite of black. So now what I've said, even though we don't really ever think about white ink in a CMYK process, what we've now said is we want to actually fill this with white ink. So then take a look at our result here. This is now the beginning of an extremely good beginning part for a mask, right? I've got the figures completely black. My background is middle gray. Can I run levels on this and hopefully end up with a really good image? Yeah, we can. So, but here's the trick. Don't do this, just watch my screen. I'm gonna turn off this one up at the very top. The way this works is that the purer your green is, the more effective this is. Because Photoshop is just looking at this and Photoshop is Photoshop for green is 0 red, 255 green, 0 blue. The further you're away from that, the less effective this color works. If I could get the perfect 255 green with no blue or red on the with no red or blue on the background, whatever, the whole background would have gone white. I can't do that, right? But is there a way that I can make this color a purer green? Exactly. The hue saturation layer that I put on here will allow you to make this a more pure, closer to that pure green that we're looking for. So to see what's going on, turn off the eyeball for the selective color at the very top. Select the hue saturation layer that's right underneath it. There is a scrubby slider that sits up at the very top. I call it a scrubby slider. A lot of people, in this case, it's the same thing as a scrubby slider, but it's truly, what it really is the targeting adjustment tool. So if you take a look up at the very top, it's the hand with the arrow that goes both ways. This is the targeting adjustment tool. If you click on that and then come over to your image, you will see on your image that cursor becomes an eyedropper. So watch what happens on my screen before you do this. You'll see right here, this says master. It's talking about the master color. But when I click on this, it's going to pick greens for me automatically. And then if I drag to the right, I saturate my color. If I drag to the left, I desaturate my color, but it's only the greens. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna hit Command Z to undo that. Turn on the eyeball for your selective color so you can watch what happens in the mask that we're trying to build. Now it looks like this is all black and white, but Photoshop understands there's color underneath this. So this same trick is going to work. If I set my cursor back to master, my properties panel back to master. Again, I've still got the targeting adjustment tool. Come over onto your image. click, you'll see it picks the greens again. It knows they are there. Drag to the right, and you can see, because I'm saturating the green and making it more green, then the impact of the selective color that's on top is amped. There's a problem though. If you zoom into this girl's head, you will see now that I've actually got hair that is already, yes. Sure. I'm going to reset this to its default. So do you have this much of it? Oh, you're still on the total black part? So go to your selective color, the one on the very top. In the drop-down menu, select greens, and then drag the black ink slider from all the way to the right side, all the way to the left. So now what you're saying is I want to fill all of the greens with white ink. But the reason I'm not getting white here is because that's not a pure green. So to make it more of a pure green, click on your hue saturation adjustment layer underneath it. Click on the hand that's up there, the targeting adjustment tool. Bring it over, click on your image, and start to drag to the right. But again, if you can't crank it all the way over, it's going to make the background as light as it can, but you can see there's actually hair on this girl now that has already gone all the way to white, which means if I use this to create a mask, I'm going to lose all that hair. This is too aggressive. Does that make sense, everyone? So I'm going to zoom into this area that is her hair, and I'm going to start to back my saturation off. So again, still using the targeting adjustment tool, still working on my hue saturation, I'm going to click and I'm going to start dragging to the left. And what I'm looking for is I can't have that hair be lighter than my background. So I'm going to continue to drag this all the way back. And you can see that by the time I get back, I'm almost back at 0 again. And I'm going to take a look around, and yeah. So in this case, because of the way it was lit, the color of her hair, all that kind of stuff, whatever, I can't amp my saturation up anymore. But in a lot of cases, you'll go all the way up to 100%. Does that make sense to everyone? Is this working for you guys? All right. So then I'm going to double click on the hand to kick back out. This is the beginning of a reasonably good mask for me. Much better than just looking at RGB channels. So I'm going to come down here, and you'll see right now that we are doing a preview of the RGB composite, but that is not necessarily the best mask that we can get. If you actually click on it, it doesn't matter which one you click on. You can click on either the red, the green, or the blue. They are all identical because this image now is grayscale. And remember, class number 1, color theory number 1. Gray is where RGB are all equal to one another. So it doesn't matter which of these we pick or to copy to start this process with, because they're all identical. The composite is not. The composite, you will see, is actually darker. If you click on the red channel, you will see that your background, actually, if we undo the eyeball for the RGB one, that the red background is actually lighter than the RGB composite. And so is the green background, and so is the blue. So I'm going to just select the blue because it's the furthest one down. And I'm going to drag my blue channel down to the icon at the bottom of the channels palette that's got the square with the little plus in the middle to make a copy of it. And I'm going to double click on that blue copy, and I'm going to rename this Knockout. And at this stage of the game, I would save my work. Okay, so now we need to tweak this out to go ahead and complete it. I'm going to zoom into her body again, and you'll see that in her body there are some like highlights on her sleeves. It was a dress that had a lot of sequins. Thank you. I was thinking glitter, it's not glitter. Sequins on it, whatever. So I've got light areas in here. I need those light areas to go dark, and then I need the background itself to go light. So again, this is the same trick that we've tried all along here. But remember, I am starting this at this stage of the game considerably better off. By the way, you can throw away the hue saturation and the selective color adjustment layers on the top. Everything we needed done is done. So I'm going to select my knockout layer again. Then I'm going to go up to the eyedropper tool, the color sampler eyedropper tool. So again, the eyedropper tool in the tool panel on the left-hand side, click on the drop-down menu, come down to color sampler tool, and I want to find an area that is really light on those the sequence that's on her shirt, and it looks like the area that's pretty much kind of under her right arm, where her right arm is next to her body. That looks pretty. That looks to be kind of the lightest in here. So I'm going to click and put 1 point down there. Make sure that you do have a 3x3 average, not a point sample. And then I'm just going to throw another point out onto the background. So I've got my 2 points here. This is exactly the same process that we did going all the way back 3 sessions ago with the girl who had the hair. We are just going to see what these values are. We're going to run levels on this to try to build a better mask. Does that make sense to everyone? Are we good on this part? Okay. So over in my info palette, I need to make these RGB colors so that they mean something to me. So I'm going to click on the drop-down menu for my point number 1 and go from this K value to RGB color. And I'm going to click and do the same thing for the background RGB color. And so now you can actually see that I've got, I'm going to see if I can find a little bit better, something lighter for that color. Yeah, it looks like that's probably about it. Yeah, I found a 5 over here, so it's close enough. We'll be good on this. But now I have a target for my levels control. So everybody have their 2 points down? Okay, Command L brings up the level dialog box. I'm going to start on my black side over here. I'm going to click on that, and I'm just going to start to drag the black point towards the center. I'm looking at my info palette. I get down to a 1. I stop. I go to my arrow keys. I click 1 up arrow. It goes to 0. I'm going to grab the white point slider and really pull this thing back until I get close to 255. I'm at a 252. I'm going to stop, go to my arrow keys, and type down until I get to 255. You'll see that I actually picked up color again in my shadow part, but you can also see there's an area of her sweater right in here that's actually gotten lighter again. So if you hover over the point sampler that we actually laid down, if you hover over it and hold down your shift key, you will get a cursor that will allow you to move it, and I'm going to move it up into an area that still gives me a more positive value. So now I've got 2s on my point number 1. So again, I'm going to go back to my point number 1. I just selected the value. I don't fuck around with the sliders at this point. I just selected the value and then go straight to my arrow keys to actually type that in. And now I've got both is happening on both. I do have a small issue that's on the side right here. There's some of the really highlight parts, really sparkly parts of the sequence, but I'm not going to go after that. What I really want to check is the hair. The hair is going to be the part that is the most challenging for me. So again, just holding down your space bar, you'll temporarily get the hand. You can move your whole image around. I'm going to come up here and look at the hair, and then I'm going to use my preview on and off to see what am I losing. And I look at this and I see a lot of fine hair. I'm not losing any of those fine hairs. Possibly a little bit on this one long one that's over here, but I don't really care about that. That's not going to be a deal maker. I'm going to zoom back out to check everything else that's going on in here. Again, using my preview on and off. But guys, how fast is it that we made this thing? Oh man, you crank through this. I can do this in 5 minutes. I'm going to continue to check around here. So the only thing that I have left to really deal with that I'm worried about here are her feet, right? Because her feet are actually on a black background and they don't separate from that. And I want to lift her off of that. How would you deal with the feet? What did we just turn in? What did we spend the first hour of this class looking at? The pen tool. Are you crazy? Look at this. The pen tool is made for these shoes and those legs. I don't need to go any higher than her ankles. That's the only thing I need to do, ankles to her toes. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm simply going to say okay to this because I feel good about that part. So then double click the hand. This is the beginning of where we're starting from. This is this beautiful, insane fucking knockout. Are you kidding me? So I do want to hit her feet really quickly, but it's really hard to see where the toes and the shadows and all of that kind of stuff end down here. You don't need to do this on the knockout layer. I'm going to go all the way back up and click on the RGB layer, And then all I know is that I need to come around this area to get the shoe that's not on that green background. So pen tool really quickly, you guys can do this with me. I'm gonna do this a little bit more down and dirty than I typically would, just because that's not what this is all about. But again, you guys do need practice with this tool, so again, I would take considerably more time to do this right, but you guys will get where we're going with all of this. When you come down and you're actually doing the rest of this, I typically do not include the shadow that's underneath her. Sometimes that helps if you actually do include the shadow, because then you don't have to rebuild the shadow. We're going to actually look at building shadows, simple shadows today. So I've got the right foot, or the left foot is selected. I'm going to go after the right foot really quickly. Again, I'm kind of butchering this selection, but you'll get the idea. All right, so I have both of my feet selected. Are you guys anywhere close to that? All right, I'll wait. Just finish one foot. You don't need to finish both. Again, this is not your homework. You're not going to turn this in. So just finish one foot so that you can see what's going on here, and then you can watch my screen. Okay, so I'm going to go over to my path palette. Both of those feet now are on a work path. You do not want to leave this on a work path, so I'm going to double click the word work path and call it shoes. And say okay, and then I'm going to load this as a selection. Command click loads it, and you can see I got the marching ants around it. I'm going to feather this slightly, so up to the select menu, down to modify, down to feather, and I'm going to put in a half a pixel, so 0.5, and say okay. And then I'm going to go back to my knockout channel. So I'm going to click on my knockout channel, and you can see it's got a selection of the feet going. However, if I'm going to grab a brush now, so I'm going to hit the B key to get a paintbrush. The minute you do that, come up to your image menu. You want to make sure that this is a completely hard paintbrush, because I want to really control where I paint. I don't want to worry about overspray. Make sure that it is a normal blending mode, 100% opacity, and 100% flow. And then if you come over to your image right now and you click, you'll notice that it paints on the shoes, which is not what I want. I want to paint on the area around the shoes. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. Command Option Z to undo that. You want to actually you want your selection to be the outside, not the shoes that we just made. So it's the inverse of that. So to get to the inverse selection, up to the select menu, down to inverse. And if you had pulled all the way back and you could see your whole image, you would now have marching ants going around the complete exterior of your image as well. But now when I paint, you actually see it protects the shoes, but it gets rid of the area that's right around her feet. And so I'm going to just give myself some space around there. Is this working for everyone? And I'm going to do the other foot as well. Again, be careful, because the upper leg is not protected. If you come up here and do this, look at my screen. If you do that, you've cut off her foot. All right, so this gives me just enough room around here that I feel good about that part. How to do what? So you need to go up to the select menu, down to inverse. That inverts your selection. So instead of selecting the shoes, it selects everything but the shoes. All right, and if you double click on the hand, this is where we're at right now, and we're in pretty good shape here. So I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. Now you can continue to do that work with a paintbrush. So again, B key, make your paintbrush a little bit bigger because we have room now. And you can simply paint to get rid of the rest of all of this. Again, don't hit the girl. And save your work. So if you go back to your history palette and you scroll up to the very top, does everybody have time-stamped save history states up here? Anybody not? All right, just to make sure. So then, oh, so what? I was just going to move on. So to make sure that you do have history snapshots enabled, yes. Just do one. You'll get what's going on here. Obviously, if you were going to do this for, you're not turning this file in. Yes, Charles. Yeah, you can either paint it out or you can use the lasso tool to circle the shit that you want to get rid of and fill it with white. I'm just looking to get a black figure on a white background. That's all I'm looking to do. All right. So to make sure that you have your history options set correctly, go to your history tab, click on it, not the actions one, but the history tab. Click on the little menu 3 hamburger thing to the right of that. You'll get a flyout menu. Come down to history options. You want to make sure that automatically create new snapshot when saving is checked, even though it doesn't work right now. But also show new history snapshot. Oh, that's the one that doesn't. No, that one actually is working. Yeah, you want to make sure that these 3 are selected. Automatically create first new snapshot. That's actually by default. Automatically create new snapshot when saving. You want to enable that, and then show new snapshot dialog box by default. That's the one that's not working right now. Say okay. So to see how this works, we are going to test it out. So go up to the top of your image menu, click on your RGB in the top of the channels menu, go back to your layers palette. We're actually going to make a duplicate of this, a girl layer, so Command J. Now, again, I'm not going to go back in and reprocess this, so I can make duplicates like this. If I wanted to have the processing of this second layer different from the original one, I would have to do that layer, smart object, new smart object via copy. But that's not what I'm going to do. As a matter of fact, I'm going to rasterize this layer because I need to paint on it. So to rasterize this layer, you come up to, so again, I've just made a copy of the smart object, up to the layer menu, down to smart objects, down to rasterize. What that just means is that it's going to turn it into a normal layer. It's no longer going to be a smart object. I'll no longer be able to double click on it and open it up into Camera Raw. All of that goes away. But I've got the virgin copy right underneath it that does have all of that data in it, so I don't need to worry about rasterizing this one. So anyway, you can do it this way. Again, layer, smart objects, rasterize, or you can do layer, rasterize, smart object. Again, Photoshop lets you do this a gazillion ways. You'll notice that that weird little icon on the lower right-hand corner is now gone, and now I can actually paint on this image, which I'm probably going to need to do. Are we good on this part? Okay, so I'm going to click on the bottom layer. What I want to do is I'm going to put this girl on a white background. That's all. It's just simple. I mean, I could put her on any color, but I'm just going to pick white. So I'm going to select the bottom layer so that I can add a solid color layer in between both of these, so that when I add the layer mask to the top one, I will see the white background. So select the bottom layer, come down to this. Again, we're going to add an adjustment layer, the circle that's half black, half white. Click on it. Come up to the very top, solid color. And it'll open up, and a solid color always populates itself with whatever your foreground color is. My foreground color happens to be black, so it starts with black. If yours was white, this would now be filling with white. But again, I can use the eyedropper tool simply to come over and click on my background color, which is white. It's just a faster way to make white, and say okay. And then I'm going to select the top layer to make it active. I'm going to go back to my channels palette and find the knockout. So if I use this knockout the way it is right now, what's going to happen? What's going to show and what's going to be hidden? Exactly. And is that what I want? No, I want the opposite of that. So select the knockout and invert it. Command I. Now will this do what I want it to do? Yes, indeedy. So I'm going to hover over the thumbnail. Again, it's not the image itself. I'm going to hover over the thumbnail, hold down the command key, click it, loads it as a selection, and then I'm going to come back over to my layers palette, make sure I'm selecting the very top one, and I'm going to add this as a layer mask. Impressive. So, zoom in on this. We've still got a couple of issues that we need to deal with, and it's going to be the last that we deal with before we actually start to get into something else. I have spill on this image. This is the dead giveaway on all of this. If you take a look at her hair, you can see that there is green in her hair that I need to fix. If you take a look at the sequence on her body, look at the sequence on this arm. The problem was not that it's shiny in my mask. The problem is that it's green. That's a problem. You can also see green on the edge on the inside of her shoulder. If you zoom down, you will see that there's green between her legs at the bottom of the skirt. All of this is spill. There is also green that's kicked up on the inside of her thigh. It's probably running down most of her leg. Yep. If you take a look at the leather, the direct reflection on the leather on strap on her shoes has also got green in it, as does the bottom of the shoe. All of that needs to be fixed. So it's not a question of getting rid of it, it's a question of fixing it. Now the reason I'm doing this is that this is a destructive move. So you do not want to do this on a virgin. I've made a copy of this, which is fine. I've rasterized it so that I can actually paint on it, because this is going to fuck this image up. It's going to look great to us, but it's going to mess this up. All right, we're going to start with her hair. So zoom into her head. And I'm going to start on the right side of her head. I'm sorry, on the left side of her head, our left side. So I am going to go to my tablet now. You can do this with a mouse. You can do this with a trackpad. Anyway, so this is where I'm going to start. So first things first, you're going to change the blending. Change the quality of your brush to a completely soft brush. So I'm going to drag it all the way down, 0% hardness. You are going to leave the opacity 100%, the flow at 100%, but you are going to change the blending mode from normal down to color. And you will see I don't have color down here. Why not? What? Yeah, because the mask is selected. I need to be working on the image now. Select the image so that you got the brackets going around the pixel part, not the mask, and then click on the blending mode and you will see color now becomes an option for you. So what color does is this. If you hover over this girl's face, I'm going to zoom in actually a little bit closer to her face. I'm going to make my brush smaller using the bracket key, so I'm using the key right next to the P key to make it actually a little bit smaller. When you're doing this kind of work, removing spill, you don't want to pick just one color and use it everywhere, because that's not how. If you take a look at her hair color, you can see parts of it are very blonde, parts of it are more brownish tan, parts of it on the right hand side are actually very dark, almost to black. There's a really sort of like dark color in here. She has a whole variety of it. If we pick just one color to remove the spill, it doesn't look natural. So, but this is what happens. I'm going to hover over her lip color. I've got a relatively small brush. Hover over her lip color and hold down your Option key. You will see that it changes your cursor to a target. If you click on that, it sets your foreground color as that color of her lip. And this is true no matter where you go. If you hover over her eye, hold down the Option key and click, that will sample the color of her eye. I'm going to do it back on her lip again just because it is really evident about what's happening. And then I want you to just come up to her bangs, the hair part up here, and just start to paint. And you can see what happens. What we're doing is that by setting the blending mode of this brush to color, it's only changing the color. It's not changing the luminosity. So the underlying structure, it still keeps it as hair. Does that make sense, everyone? If you didn't do that, hit Command Z to undo that. Let's change our blending mode back to normal. I'm going to leave that red color as my foreground color, and now I'm going to paint across her hair. And you can see, in this case, it changes the color and the luminosity both. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to make this big red statement here on her head. I want to remove the spill, which means I just need to get rid of the green color, but I don't want to get rid of the hair. So Command Z to undo that. Change the blending mode back again to color. And then I'm going to start working on the spill. So I typically sample color of her hair that's close to the spill that I want to remove. So I'm working in this area that's kind of right in here. I'm going to zoom into this area so you can see it. However, the problem that I've got with the hair that's on the outside right here is that there is green background coming through that. Again, hair is transparent. But if you look at the hair just to the right of it, her face is blocking that background, so there is no green coming through that. So this is where I'm going to actually sample my color. So I'm going to hold down the Option key, click, it gives me a sample of color. I'm going to make my brush a little bit larger. And then here's the trick. When you're removing spill, you do not want to remove, you don't want to touch anything that doesn't need to be fixed. So a lot of people will start doing this work and they'll go wild with this thing. And the problem is that you start coloring hair that didn't need to be recolored. You start coloring skin that didn't need to be colored, the color of her hair. You need to be very careful about this. So what you think of when you're doing this work is you're starting from the outside and working your way in. So that's what I'm going to do right here. So I'm going to start down here on the lower part of her head, and I'm simply going to start brushing through this like this. And you can see it removes that spill. I'm going to continue to work my way all the way up on this long part of her hair. Then at this stage of the game, I'm going to change to another color. So I'm sampling a little bit darker color that's kind of up in this part of her head. Hold down the Option key, click to resample, and I'm going to go on the inside of this to actually fix that color. Then as you go up, I've got the same color that I can do the curls that are on the top. And again, only touch the areas that need to be fixed. By the time I get up to the very top of her head, I'm going to resample another color up there to actually give me more work. Then I'm over on the far right-hand side over here. What's interesting about the right-hand side is it's really in dark shadow. It's got green in it. You don't need to worry so much. Again, the darkness there is being controlled by the luminosity. So even though I've got a relatively, you can see I've got my foreground colors a little bit tan, you can still remove that green and you'll see it'll actually color all of her hair, that color part in there. You'll see that there's also a part of her bangs that are actually being hit by a side light. I've got to make my brush considerably smaller because I don't want to paint any hair in here that doesn't need to get rid of that green element. So a much smaller brush, I'm going to resample my color here and then get rid of that part. If I feel like that this is not working for me, so let's say for instance I feel like the color that I just put in is slightly wrong. The best thing about this is that, let's say I need this to have more red in it. You can resample the red color that's up above here and hit this a second time. You can recolor this as many times as you want. I recolored it green to blonde. If I don't like that blonde color, I pick another blonde and just paint over that. It will cover all. The green is gone, but then the old blonde will be gone as well. So if you feel like you've gone too far, you can actually pull back. Does that make sense, everyone? If you feel like your color is too strong, there is nothing that will stop you from actually dropping your opacity down to 50%, 30%. Let's say you want to mix colors. I don't want all of this red in here. You can actually continue to work like that. So I'm going to continue to work my way down here. So for instance, like this color right down here on this side of her face, I felt like that's too strong. It's too much red in it. So I'm going to resample a color up in here that's got less red in it, and I'm going to start to run down here. And if I felt like that was too strong, again, I could drop my opacity down to 30% and go in here and change the color. That would only add some of the new color. So you can mix color while you're actually doing this. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this up really quickly. A little bit bigger brush. And get rid of all the rest of this. I gotta crank my opacity all the way back up again and go after the rest of all of this. Again, if I feel like this is too light a color in here, I can actually click on a much darker color over here. So something like right over here as a darker color, and use that to paint this in, and I think that becomes a much more believable hair color. So I like that part. Go ahead and finish all of this part. Stay away from that highlight that's on her cheek. We need to go after that in a completely different way. but all the hair that's down here, all the stuff that's in the middle. So the stuff that's on her cheek, you actually need to base it on her skin color, not on this hair color. So I'm going to go over to the lower part of her cheek. Everybody look at my screen to see where I'm at right now. I want to get rid of this green highlight that's happening in here. I'm going to sample of color right here and then see what that does. And I'm just going to run it up again. Do not let this hit the hair because it'll recolor the hair incorrectly. But that ended up being a pretty good color for her cheek and her neck and a little bit underneath. On the other side over here, I need a different hair color in there to fix that part. And also the line that's running right down along that top edge. So that's actually taking care of this part. I'm going to zip back out. And so you can see the difference in her hair. But now to see what you've really done, hold down your shift key and click on the layer mask that is controlling this. Would you call that a destructive move? Yes, you would. But the advantage of this is this will also point out to you what you have missed. So if you take a look, everybody look at my screen here really quickly. Look at the area that I've actually missed. I missed the whole part of spill right in here. You can paint this in at this point. It's again the wrong color, so I'm going to Command Z to undo that. I'm going to resample the hair up here and then hit this part right here. You can see I missed this whole hair part that came down here. You need to hit all of that part. If you take a look around here, I've missed stuff on her shoulder. So again, I can sample color down here on her shoulder and come up here. So it's just a way to see what it is you're actually missing in all of this and what you're not missing in all of this. And then again, when you turn that back off, you'll be good to go. I've got a mistake right here on the top of her shoulder, so I'm going to sample a color of her, I'm sorry, you need to go back to the image itself, the pixel content, sample that color and actually paint that back in. This will also take care of all the spill in the little sequence. So sample the color of her dress, and you want to run all the way down her body, both sides. If she's showing, if that part of her arm is showing, you actually want to make sure you hit all of that. She does have green on the side of her body. We are going to deal with that in just a second, and so on and so on. Again, I've got spill that's right between her legs showing through the dress. You can simply run across that using the dress color, and all of that spill is now removed. You guys should be jumping up and down for joy right now. I actually, the very first time I showed this in one of my classes, I had a student just burst into tears. They had been working with this kind of stuff for so long, and they were never able to get rid of the spill, and you can see how simple and easy it is. But look at the quality of this, guys. Are you out of your mind? You go into a job interview and you do this, you're not the $9.50 retoucher. You are the, I want $500 a day as a retoucher. That would be a starting position. Questions about this? Are we good on this part? Okay, one last thing that we're going to do here really quickly, and you can see it, especially if you zoom in. Our knockout here is pretty good. But if you zoom into her lower arm on the right-hand side, you can see a little bit of it. I'm going to look on the left-hand side and see if we see it there a little bit more. Yeah, you don't pick it up quite as, well, yeah, you kind of pick it up right here. You can sort of see there's this, actually, I'm not going to do it with this image. It's still there. There's a problem on this image. Did you see that really super fine little green line that's going around this? We're going to look at a worse version of that, and we're going to fix that part. So, yeah. Okay, so I have got, we're going to call this 339. We'll call it 340. A hard 5. You guys need to be back at 345. We really got a lot to get through, and I'm panicking now. Again, if you've got that image open, you can close it. If you want to save it to look at it or refer to it, whatever, you're welcome to do that. It's not going to be homework. You're not going to turn it in. So for me, I just close mine up. I do want to go back to our session number 5 folder one more time. There's one last image in there that we need to talk about and look at really quickly. So again, session 5 folder, we're looking for a file called Choke and Spread. So if you can open that up. Could everybody find that? Okay. If you open this guy up and then zoom in and take a look at this girl's shoulder, that's where I really want to go in here. And you can see the problem that we've actually got in this. you'll see that there's this dark green line that separates, it goes all the way around her. And if you go down further, you'll see there's some, that this green line is evident. If you take a look at the glove, so I'm down looking at the glove where it's pressed against the side of her body, that's really more spill that's happening on that I could actually fix using the trick that I just showed you. But this dark green line is really challenging to get rid of. And the reason this thing exists is because this is an edge. So what happens in digital photography that does not happen in film photography, in digital photography, when you actually process an image from raw data to being something that we look at, what ends up happening is that there's a lot of averaging of color and tone of pixels that are very close to one another. Because when you think about it, what happens is that when you make a picture, a digital picture, there are individual little lenses that cover every single pixel of your sensor. And those filters, not lenses, but those filters actually only allow a pixel to either be red, green, or blue. And they have that all over your camera, all over your sensor. Oh, we should look at this. This is basically what a sensor looks like in all sensors. So basically what ends up happening, all sensors are black and white. They do not understand color. So in order to cheat, what ends up happening is that they cover, so if you think of this as a sensor, they cover it with these filters. And you'll see that in this case, there's a blue filter on this covering this. There's a green filter covering this one. There's another blue one. There's a red one covering here. And what happens if you take a look at this is that anywhere where you have the same color filter, it will let photons of that color light come through it. But it will reject everything else. So you can see right here that if you have a blue filter, it lets in blue light. If you have a green filter, it lets in green light. If you have, this is back to a blue one. This blue one though will not, it'll let in blue light, but it will reject red light and it will reject a green light as well. And they do this in a sort of this faux way to capture the color, to give you some sense, to be able to reconstruct the color of your image using basically a black and white sensor. But the problem with this arrangement is that you then only end up with one of the three colors that you need to describe color. So for instance, underneath the red filter right here, you have the red color, but this is a pixel. You need a blue value for this and you need a green value for this as well. But those things have been rejected. So it needs to be constructed, and the way they construct it is using math. And so this is basically what happens. Oh, this is a really old version of this. This is the version I want you to look at. So in order to do that, if you take a look at this image right here, this is just a sample of what would be covering a sensor. And again, every one of these is pixels. You've got 6 million of these on a sensor. So they're incredibly small, but nonetheless. So let's say that we're going to try to come up with the full color information for this red R19 right here. Well, it's got a red filter on it, so it's letting in red light. So you have the value for red. You've got your red value. What you're missing is your green value and your blue value. Does that make sense, everybody, what's going on here? Are we good on this? So in order to come up with the green value in this, what they do is they take the four green pixels that are surrounding this, they add up the value of all four of those and divide by 4. They take the average of the ones that are around this, and that's the green value they assign to R19. So now that gives us a green value. So now we've got a red value and a green value, but we need the blue value as well. So then they take the 4 pixels that are blue that are surrounding outside of that. So this blue, this blue, this blue, this blue, they add those up, take the average of it by dividing by 4, and that becomes the blue value for R19. Does that make sense what's going on? This is really complicated, but it is the only way they can take a black and white sensor and essentially assign color, make it a color sensor. But when they do this, you can see there's a lot of averaging going on here. They're taking information that's sitting way outside of this pixel and putting it into this pixel. And this whole process, this is called demosaicing. This whole process softens your image radically because you are taking detail and information that is nearby a pixel and adding it to that pixel. And you end up developing a softness in all of this. So to combat this, all of you know there's a sharpening control when you bring a file into Photoshop, into Camera Raw. Or is it you all aware of that part? Everybody, really quickly. Get rid of the girl that we just opened up. Go back to that image really quickly. So again, the folder that was the urban folder, that's again, it's in your session number 4, student folder. Take that back. It's 5. It's not 4. Sorry. The one that said the urban 2 thing, whatever. Just double click on any one of those CR2 files. It doesn't matter which one you click on. This will open it up. If you actually got a raw image into Camera Raw, if you click on your detail drop down, you'll actually see that there is a sharpening value right here. This is called input sharpening. This is not sharpening like you would use to get something ready to go to print. This is also not artistic sharpening. Again, people get into that. People will make eyebrows sharper, skin softer. I mean, that's artistic sharpening. It's not that. What this is it's trying to remove the problem of all that averaging that happens when they demosaic your file. So this is on by default. And this exists in every single raw processor that there is. The problem with it, so what it does is that it actually looks for edges and it runs sharpening on the edges of your image. But sharpening is really contrast. That's what it is. So it's taking that edge and it's trying to make that edge more contrasty. So what happens in the work that we're doing right here, I'm going to cancel out of this. What you're seeing here is this girl was shot on green screen, but because they ran sharpening on the edge right here, it actually took part of the green and made it darker and part of the green that made it lighter. So you end up with this edge because when I did that zero selective color, this edge falls outside of the range of green that I was trying to select. Does that make sense? You will see this halo around every single image you knock out for the rest of your life. You cannot avoid this. But we need to fix it. Does that make sense? So if you try to actually go in and remove this, if you treat it as spill, you will actually get rid of the green cast, but what you'll still have left over is a dark, is an edge that part of it is darker and part of it is lighter. It'll be like a halo. We need to eliminate it. We can't just fix it using spill removal. Are we good on that part? All right, so this is how we're going to fix it. In Photoshop, I need everybody to create a synthetic file for me really quickly. So Command N or up to the filter dialog and just do brand new. We're going to just make a fake file so you can see what it is, how we're going to go after doing this. So again, I'm going to change this from pixels to inches. I'm going to make it 10 inches wide by 8 inches tall, 300 ppi. And again, I'm going to change my profile to Adobe RGB. And I'm going to say OK. So it's just a blank file. Everybody good on this part? OK. Does everybody have the rulers showing? The rulers on the edge? If you don't have your...
Just a question.
Yeah.
What's the difference between RGB and working RGB?
If you're working RGB, is RGB, you're fine. All right, so if you don't have your rulers showing, come up to the View menu, down to Rulers, and put a check mark next to that. This will allow us to draw out guidelines. So what I just want to do is draw out guidelines enough to make a square in the middle of this image. I'm going to, again, double-click on the hand to get it as big as it'll go. I'm going to simply click and pull down a line. I'm going to click and pull down another line. I'm going to click then on the left-hand side and pull out a line and another one, actually, again, like that. So I've just got a rectangle that's happening in the middle of my image. Everybody good on that part? Okay. I'm going to hit the M key to get the marquee tool. When you do that, make sure that the feathering on your marquee tool is set to 0 pixels. The style, you want to be normal. If you look at your marquee tool in the tool panel, you want to make sure that you've got the square one, not the round one, but with the square one done, you can come over to the corner of this part of your image right here. You can click and drag down till you get all the way to the other side. So all I've done is made a selection. But I want to be able to go back to this selection, and that's why I've got this, the guidelines on this. Make sense? Okay, we're gonna fill this with black. Right now, black is my foreground color, so Option Delete will fill that with black. Actually, looking at this, this is not black, so I'm gonna hit Command Z to undo that. I'm gonna hit just the D key by itself to make my foreground and background colors their default. And now my foreground color now is black, so now Option Delete will fill it with black. Command D to deselect. And then I need you to zoom in really close to this edge right here. I'm going to come into the corner right here. It's easier to see it in here. And you can see it's fit it's really close to my guidelines right here. It's fit into this part really well. And if you run your cursor over the black part and you look up at the info palette and at the very top, you'll see that it's reading zeros. And if you go up to the top, you'll see that when I go into the white part, it's reading 255. So it's in this incredibly sharp thing. If I go down through this, you will actually see there's a period in there where I get just a couple of other values on my screen up in here. Basically, that's trying to, it's what they call anti-aliasing. It's trying to make this part of my image look smooth. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. What I'm going to do now, though, this is what they call, it's called choking and spreading. And what you do with choking and spreading is that we are going to try to either make this area larger. So I'm going to try to get the black to grow out into the white. That's actually called a spread. Or I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to try to get the white to encroach into and in on to the black area. Does that make sense? But to do this, I need areas of gray in between the two. So follow me with this one for just a second, and then you can ask me, we'll talk about questions about this just to see. So my first move is that when I try to choke and spread is that I need to build layers, shades of gray between these two. And the way you do that is simply with a blur. So if you come up to your filter menu and you come down to blur and then down to Gaussian blur, I'm going to put in a Gaussian blur of 8. And you can now see that again, I've got black that's down here in the body. I then go through shades of gray here up into white. Did that work for everyone? And so I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. Again, the amount that you put in there is not really the issue. But now, on this image right now, you will see that I've got black. I've got a whole range of grays that go from black to white, and then I've got white. If you hit Command L to bring up your levels dialog box, we can actually say, I want to remap those middle grays. So if you grab the shadow slider and you start to go to the middle, what you were saying is that I want things that are now middle gray to be black. And if I crank this thing all the way up really close to white, it will say I want even your midtones and your lighter grays to be black. So grab your middle slider and start to drag it towards the center, and you will see that your black box begins to grow. This is called a spread. We are now shifting the entire thing out to make it bigger. Did that make sense to everyone what just happened? Where are you in this? Perfect. So then Command L to bring up the levels dialog box. And then grab the shadow slider and start to drag it towards the center. What you're saying is you want all of these tones of gray here to be black. It's an illusion. It looks like, okay, well, yeah, as you keep doing that, I want all of those to be black. So now I'm saying I want all those really light grays in that blur to be black. So it appears as if this square is growing. Again, that is called a spread. Are we good on this part? All right, zero that white back out again, the shadow slider back out again to get back to our image. If you grab the other side, the white slider now, and you start moving it towards the center, now what you're saying is you want all of those tones of gray to be white. So now you'll see it starts to move in the opposite direction. It is now coming in on my image. This is called a choke. So it is a way for us to do, we can use this whole principle on our layer masks to make them bigger or to make them smaller. You remember I told you when we were doing the select and mask workspace to ignore all those edge modifications, shrink your image, grow your image, make it, you had no control over that. This is how you control it. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and cancel out of that. You can close this up. So our trick in all of this is that we need to actually choke our mask to actually make this thing work. If I can choke my mask in, I can get rid of this dreaded green line, right? But the problem is that there's areas like, if you look at her hair, there's areas up in here that I don't want to choke these areas up here. So it's not an all or nothing game. Make sense? So to give me the best of both worlds, you need to use what's called history states. So what history states are is what your image looks like in any given moment in time. So right now, I'm going to click on my layer mask because that's what I'm going to be working on. I'm going to come over to my history palette, and at the very bottom of your history palette, there's a thing that looks like a little camera. If you click on that little camera, in the old days of Photoshop, when this worked and the setting that we just put into history options, you would get a dialog box that opens up and it says, what do you want to name this thing? And you would name it pre-choke. However, Photoshop now, this version is broken, so it just names it snapshot 1, and you can see it's sitting up right here. You need to double click on that snapshot 1 and you need to rename it pre-choke. And then you need to go back down to history where you actually just opened this file and click on open. So what we have up here now are two history states. They're basically the same thing. It's what the file looked like when we opened it. That's the very first one at the very top, the choke and spread.psd. We've also got a version before we actually do this choke. And now we're going to do the choke, and then we're going to create another history state of post-choke so that I can go back and forth between these. Don't worry, if you don't get this yet, you will. So I'm going to zoom back over and take a look at her arm, because this is where I want to be able to watch how much this actually happens. Make sure that you do have the mask is selected. Up to the filter menu, down to blur, down to Gaussian blur. Now, the amount that you blur this is an art form. So all I can say to you is that if we don't get it right the first time, we simply go back in history and we pick a different value of how much we actually do the blurring part. I can tell you right now that 8 pixels on this is way too much. So I'm going to crank this down to like 3, I'm going to say a 3 pixel on mine. It looks pretty good to me. Again, I do this all the time, so I have a good feeling about it. If you use the preview check mark on the Gaussian blur dialog box, you'll see that we're actually making our problem worse. This is exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to go with a value of 3, and I'm going to say OK to that. So if you go in on your image, hold down the Option key and click on the layer mask. And again, then go back in your history. You can watch what happens. You actually blurred that whole edge, and it created those intermediate shades of gray that are on the inside. Does that make sense what just happened? All right, so I'm going to click back on my image so that I can see the image, but you need to make sure that you still have the mask that you're working on, not the pixel content, but the mask. And we're going to bring up the levels dialog box, Command L. With the level dialog box open, I don't ever remember which one of these to go after first. So I'm just going to grab the shadow slider and start to pull it towards the middle. And what you'll see is, yes, indeed, that's the right slider. So I am now choking this image down, and you can see that green line is going away. However, it's also leaving an edge that's really too soft on the inside. So I can now grab my white point slider and start to pull it in as well, because then what I'm doing is I'm creating contrast along that edge. So I'm going to pull it back in, and you can see it will actually sharpen up that line a little bit. You don't want to go too crazy about it. I'm going to come back and push in my shadow slider a little bit more. But this is now the difference for me. If you want the same values that I've got on mine, I have 158 for my shadow point and a 231 for my highlight point. But now again, I'm going to turn my preview mark on and off again, and you can see, oh my God, this did exactly what I wanted it to do. Now, right now, if any of you care about a life in retouching, you should be fucking jumping up and down inside, screaming for joy, waiting for the I mean, it is just like insanity. Nobody knows this shit. This is a lost art. Not that nobody knows it. There's a lot of people who know it, but I like to exaggerate. Okay, so this looks good to me, so I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. But now if you take a look, before you do anything else, if you take a look up at this girl's hair, you can see that this did a real hack job on her hair as well, because it choked everything. That's not what I want. So, but at this stage of the game, right after you've done levels, we are going to do another history snapshot. So click on the little camera again. It's going to name it again, snapshot 1, which is wrong. I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to rename this post choke. And then again, before you do anything, the way this is now set up, if we just start working on the image right now, we are going to lose all of our history, and it's going to be working in this post-choke state. This is all problems that are created by Photoshop, not fucking fixing this opening up as a dialog box so that I can name this thing. It's forcing me to come up here and select it, which is a mistake, and then I've got to name it, which is it's a shit show. So anyway, I'm going to go back down to my history state. The name is correct. I'm going to go back down to my history state and click levels so that my history will continue. If you don't do this, if you come up here and you leave this at post choke, watch my screen, don't do this. I'm going to hit the B key and I'm just going to hit a brush. You'll notice I lose all of my history, and this is now trying to work it on a post choke state. Not what you want to do, and hopefully I haven't just fucked that up. I haven't. So anyway, I'm going to select this again. So now I've got both a pre-choke state and a post-choke state. So if we take a look at the image now, you can actually see that this has been choked, and I want to keep that part. But what I would like to do is restore the part to her hair that wasn't. So if you take a look at the way history states work, there's a little square box that's right next to each one of these states. So there's this little box right here, this one here, this one here. You do not ever want to select the state. Do not click on post-choke or pre-choke. Do not click on those. You do not want to do that. What you want to do is you want to select the little box to the left of it to say, I want you to use this state for my history brush. I want you to use what the image looked like when you use the history brush. That is not the same as selecting the state. So to see what I mean, I'm going to come over here next to the pre-choke. Again, I want to restore her hair to the way it was before I did that choke. So if you click on the check mark, you will see that it moves the little history brush icon from the very opening choke and spread PSD down to the pre-choke state. I did not select this state. You'll notice I'm still down on levels in my history panel. Does this make sense to everyone? Guys, this can really fuck you up. You need to make sure that you understand this part and then pay attention when you're first working with this and learning this part, okay? So then I can zip back out again, and I'm going to go after my history brush. Your history brush is the brush right underneath the clone stamp tool. If you click on it, it looks just like the little baby icon that's right next to it that we just moved. If you click on this little baby icon, you'll get a flyout menu, and you can either pick the history brush or the art history brush. You want to go ahead and pick the history brush. Then you are going to be working on your layer mask. Again, what we need to do is go back in history of the layer mask. The mask is what got choked, not the image. So if you select the image and you use this history brush, you will not see anything change because we didn't change the image. We changed the mask. So with the history brush selected, again, up at the very top of your menu, it doesn't necessarily matter whether you keep this hard or soft because history is what's controlling it. Change your blending mode, though, to normal. 100% opacity, 100% flow. I am going to go back to my tablet to do this work. And then I'm going to use a pretty big brush because, again, you don't need to worry about selections because it's just painting back history. I'm working on my layer mask and then simply paint this back in, and you can see it restores all of that. Then let's say you make a mistake. Let's say you've been just wild and cavalier about it. I want you to actually paint down the entire shoulder of her arm. If you click on this and paint it all the way back, you will notice that you actually brought that green line back in here. Because again, this is what the mask looked like before I did the choke. But now if you come over to your history panel and you click on post choke, again, don't click on the layer, just put that little history brush icon to the left side of this, then you can come right back in here and paint the choke right back on it. So this lets you go back and forth between your choke states and your unchoked states. Why would this matter? Well, it's huge. Number one, we restored it on her hair, but go all the way down to her shoes. So come all the way down to her shoes. This happens all the time. If you take a look at her heel, in her heel, so again, I'm looking on her shoe on the left-hand side. If we actually look at this as the post-choke state, it's actually been choked. But if I click on the icon to paint with the pre-choke state and paint across this, you'll see it actually brings back in something I don't want on the heel, but look at the bottom of her shoe. Her bottom of her shoe was actually missing the sole that came under. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and instead I'm going to make my brush much smaller, and I'm going to paint back in that line. That's actually also the same thing I want to get rid of, so never mind, I'm going to lie about that one. Undo that one. Let's go to the top of the shoe. So the very top, I'm going to click and see what my pre-choke state looks like there. And on the pre-choke state here, I might want to keep that in. Also, there's an area that's missing right on the top of the toe of her shoe. You can bring that back in. That is not something that I wanted to be choked out. That is actually the shape of her shoe. Does that make sense? But again, if you feel like, oh, well, you brought back the part in the top there that you shouldn't bring back, then again, I can just go back up to my other choke state, to my post-choke state, and I can get rid of that part until I get down to the top of the shoe where I want to keep it in. Questions about this? Are we good? All right. You can close this guy up. We do not need to save that. Okay. If I only had all that time I gave you guys on break, if I only had that back. Just kidding. Next image that we're going to go to, we're going to start retouching finally. So go into your class number 6. Inside your student folder, there is a file in there called clonehealing1.psd. I need you to double click on that really quickly for me, and then double click on the hand. So when you open this up, it's going to have a layer that you can't see that's on the top of the eyeballs turned off, but this layer is selected. I need you to actually select the one that's underneath it, because this is the one that we're going to work on. So really quickly, we are going to look at a couple of strategies here, and then we're going to go into something where most of you guys have never been. How many people got into this class because they wanted to learn how to retouch really high-end skin? You're at the right class then. For those of you who are listening to the video right now who didn't show up today for class, you're not going to have the ultimate benefit of this, but at any rate. So we are going to start with the basic of the retouching tools. I'm not going to go in too deep on this because my suggestion is that for the most part they are really hack tools that you don't really want to be using, and specifically I'm going to call out the clone stamp tool and the healing brush tool. Now there are places to use them, but most people don't use them in the right place. Most people, and you guys have all seen this, you go to any Sephora, you go to any Ulta, you look in any fashion magazine, whatever, you go to Jewel in their makeup section, whatever, you'll just see people with plastic skin. You see just retouching that's just horribly done. The goal of all decent, good retouching is that you do not destroy the texture. So when it comes to skin, that one of the reasons I stick with skin in this, even though there's a few beauty shooters in here, there's a huge number of you who do not shoot beauty, but All of us understand skin and skin texture, and all of us understand what it looks like when you've completely obliterated the texture of skin. It looks plastic, it looks fake, it looks wrapped, we need to avoid that at all costs. Every bit of retouching that I get into this class will be to solve the problems that you perceive, but maintain the integrity of what it is you're trying to do it on. Because it's simple for any idiot to go in here with a clone stamp tool and just obliterate it all, and boom, you're done. Or even worse, go in and just blur the shit out of the skin, and then boom, you're gone. I mean, it's just like, that's putting you back in the $9.50 hour retouching group. And that's not what I want for any of you. All right, but first we need to know the difference in the tool. Can anybody explain to me the difference? Well, first off, anybody here not familiar with the clone stamp tool and the healing brush tool? Okay, we're gonna get to all of that part. But for the rest of you, can you tell me what the difference is? It looks like they do the same thing. Sort of. So we're going to get into it and talk about exactly what it is. Because, again, we use both of these tools, but we use them for two very different reasons. And more often than not, my experience is that people have no idea which one to use or why. So we're going to start with we're going to start with the clone stamp tool. So it's the S key on your keyboard. You can do this with a tablet, or you can just do it with your mouse. It's probably easier to do it with your mouse just to begin with. But if you come over and take a look at your tool palette on the side, you'll click. It's the one that looks like it's supposed to look like a, sort of like a stamp, that you would use for, return address or paid or whatever. Anyway, if you click on the drop-down menu, you'll see you have clone stamp tool and you have the pattern stamp tool. I'm going to ask you to stick with just the clone stamp tool. Immediately, your eyes should go up to the top to the options bar that's at the top. We're going to click on the drop-down menu, and I'm going to make this a completely hard clone stamp tool, so I'm dragging the hardness all the way over to 100%. It's going to be a normal blending mode, 100% opacity, 100% flow, and then all the way over to the right-hand side, you will see where the sample size is. Actually, you can leave this as current layer. Sometimes we need to do current and below. So right now, if you click on the drop-down menu, you'll see your options are current layer, which means it'll restrict it only to the layer that is active. Current and below, it will look at what's going on in the layers below and then actually make the change on the layer that you're on. And then finally, all layers, it doesn't matter whether you've got a layer underneath it or on top of it, it will take all of that into consideration. But right now, we're just going to leave it on current. It won't be any different than if you put it on current and below right now, because there's nothing below us. I'm going to make my clone stamp tool bigger. Again, it's a brush, so you can use the bracket keys to actually make it bigger. And then I'm going to come over here to the area that's right at the very top of my gradient. To use the tool, what you do is you set your source point first, and then you brush over the area you're wanting to correct. So my goal in this is to actually make this gray square, the gray part of this image right here, I want it to be the gradient. So I'm going to set the sample first. So I'm going to do it up at the very top in the middle of my screen. To set your sample, you hold down the Option key and click once. That is now established. That is your source. Now when you come over to the gray side, you will actually see it gives you a preview of what it's going to change. And now if we click and drag straight down, you will notice not only is it changing, you can see the little X that's in the gradient, that's actually my source. So as I'm starting to travel down, it's actually doing a replacement. Does that make sense? And Mark is exactly right. This is 100% replacement. It's pixel to pixel replacement. So as I start to come down here, it actually does that job. And you can see it does a very good job of it. Now, no matter where I start, I'm going to start now in the middle of my gradient on the far right-hand, far left-hand, well, sort of towards the middle. I'm going to click and drag down again, and you will actually notice that in my case, my brush restarted up at the original clone sample point up here. Did that happen to you all? It didn't. And the reason that hasn't happened is because you have this aligned check mark checked. So I'm going to undo this. I'm actually going to go all the way back in time so that mine works the same way yours does. I'm going to click on aligned again, set my sample point here, click and drag down. But now if you actually come in the middle of your image and click and drag down, you'll see that it understands, it keeps the relationship between these two. So wherever you set your sample and then land it on a destination, that relationship is maintained. So if I come over here, I can do that. I can come up here and it'll do this again. I can come over here, it'll do this again. It maintains that whole relationship. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, I'm going to go back in history to when I opened this up. Again, select my bottom layer. Now I'm going to uncheck that aligned one and do the same trick again. I'm going to hover over the very top. I'm going to hold down my sample point. I'm going to click to set a sample here. I'm going to click and drag down, and you can see the same, it looked like the very same thing has happened. But now when I actually come over here to the side, I'm going to click and drag down. You'll notice that every single time it goes back to my original source point, no matter where I am. So I can come down in here. It's back to my original source point. There are reasons that we can use this. There's reasons that we can leverage this. So if you think about establishing a really good area of skin tone and you want to use that to actually change texture in other parts of your image, you can set it up like this so that your source point is always going back to, so every single time it goes back to. Does that make sense, everyone? What's going on? All right, I'm going to go back to the very top and change that again. So now we're actually going to change and do something else. We're going to go to the healing brush tool. So to get to the healing brush tool, it's 2 up from the clone stamp tool. The one that's on the outside of it now looks like a magic band-aid, for a lack of a better way of putting it. If you click on that flyout menu, they're jamming the shit out of this tool here. So in the original days, it started with the spot healing brush tool, and then the healing brush tool, the patch tool, and the red eye removal tool. They've now actually added the remove tool into this and the content aware move tool in this. We are only going to work with healing brush tools themselves. The remove tool is not really a healing brush, but nonetheless. At the very top, the spot healing brush tool, what that tool does is that, again, it's this whole source and destination move. In spot healing, Photoshop determines the source. So you do not use that option key trick to set your source point and then go to your destination point. If you want to have that kind of control, you use the healing brush tool, which is what I'm going to ask you guys to select right now. So select the healing brush tool. We're going to do the same thing. Again, make sure that you've got your bottom layer selected, not the one that's hidden. This also has a brush size to it. So if you click and open its brush size, the healing brush tool, its default hardness is 50%. So if yours is anything different, set it to 50%. Again, if you want that flyout menu to go away without making a mark on your image, click near the word that says Adobe. You do want to leave this as a normal blending mode. We are going to leave this as a line. That's the very same trick that we used before. And we're still going to do this only working on our current layer. So again, you've got the current layer and before and below. You've also got a limited set of blending modes in this. I'm going to actually ask you to leave it as normal. And then we are going to actually work with the tool. So I'm going to make this brush a little bit larger. So the way you need to think about this tool is this. What the healing brush tool does is a 2-step process. So again, if we go back to clone stamp tool, it's a pixel for pixel replacement. It takes the source pixels and replaces the destination with the source pixels 1-to-1. But what the healing brush tool does is a very different thing. What the healing brush tool does is it looks at the texture of your source. It then replaces the texture of your destination with the source texture, but then it looks the area around your destination for both tone and color, and it tries to match the tone and color of your new texture to the surrounding area. It happens in 2 different steps, 2 different phases. So let's see how that works. Again, we're going to come up to the very top of the gradient, hold down the Option key, click. That sets the gradient as my source. I'm going to come over to my destination. You'll see I've got a little bit softer brush here right now. That's because we set our hardness at 50%, not at 100%. And I'm going to click and drag down and let go. And nothing happened. Is that true? That is not true. It did exactly what I said it would do. It has replaced the texture of the gradient, which has no texture. This is a synthetic file. It replaced it. It has the exact same texture in the gray area that I'm going to. But then it took the area around the new texture, which is only gray, and matched it. So it did what it was supposed to do, but our result is that it looks identical. because it did what it's supposed to do. It replaced this texture with this texture. They're the same texture. I created this file. It's a synthetic file. There's no pixels to this. There's no nothing. I mean, there's no noise grain to this. So it replaced the texture, and then it matched the color. So you don't see any shift because the textures are the same and the color got blended in. Does that make sense, everyone? Are we good on this part? All right, let's make this real. And this will be your homework, so you definitely want to save this. So we are going to go to your assignment folder for week number 6. And inside that, there is a file called skineyesretouch.psd. I need you to open this up. And I need you to double click on it. So we are going to do professional scale retouching on this. And what does that mean? So the ads that I know for certain what they spent on, there's a series of L'Oreal ads of Rachel Weisz that got flagged for being over retouched in Britain 5 years ago, something like that. But at any rate, the story behind that retouching was that it took over a month and it was well over $200,000 for the retouching for that one image, one picture of her. And that's because they retouch it doing it the correct way. So what I'm getting ready to show you guys, and the method that I'm going to show you right now, will break every one of you. So I'm just going to throw this out in the beginning. This is, people said they want to know how to retouch correctly. It is not the fucking clone stamp tool. I'll tell you that right now. It is not. So anyway. We're going to start off this. I'm going to show you how I do this part, and then we'll go from there. All right, so the first thing that you're going to do is make a copy of this background. So again, Command J. You're going to double click on that copy, and you're going to rename it Pixel Retouch. Your retouching from now on in this class will go in this order. So when we talk about doing retouching, we're going to talk about pixel retouching, tonal retouching, liquify, color retouching. All of these things have a very specific order that you need to do them in. So your first is always pixel retouching. The next one's going to be tonal. We'll get to that in just a second. So with pixel retouching set, we are going to go after what I call the cigarette burn. If you take a look at this girl's cheek on the right-hand side and you zoom in, I have no idea what this thing is on her face, but you can clearly see that the makeup artist tried to fix something that was on her face. Can everybody find that spot in there? All right, we good in this part? All right, you cannot fix this with tonal retouching. We have to use the retouching tools that you are familiar with to actually fix this thing. We will look in a couple of weeks later on about other strategies for fixing this in a different way, but for what I want you to do right now for this assignment, this is how you're going to do it. So our first move in here is to actually try to use, again, what is my problem with this image? What is the problem with this part right here? If I need to fix this, what do I need to fix? Mark, you had it. Texture is number one, but what else do I need to fix? The color. So do I use the clone stamp tool, which is a pixel for pixel trade? Or do I use the healing brush tool, which fixes texture, replaces texture, and then blends the color in around it? Which one would you use? Healing brush tool, no question about it. So that's what we're going to do. So to use the healing brush tool, we're going to select the healing brush tool, not the spot healing brush tool. We'll look at that in a second, but the healing brush tool. I'm going to come over here and make my brush a little bit smaller. Make sure that this is, again, 50% hardness brush, but this is where you get into the problem of actually doing this kind of work. I'm going to use a 50% brush to try to blend this in, because otherwise my healing brush is obvious. You'll see this just dot on this person's face, right? That's not what I want. So I actually use a soft brush to blend it in. But when you do that, that soft edge of the brush, it covers only part of the original texture that you're trying to fix, and it adds new texture. So you are taking the fixing texture and you are mixing it with the original bad texture. And if you do this all over your image, you end up with plastic face. That's why we don't use these tools to do this. But in this case, it's so extreme, we have no choice. So To use this tool correctly, again, you need to set the sample point. So I'm going to avoid all the pebbly skin that's up here over her face. I don't want to bring that texture down in here. I want smooth texture. So I've got some that's either up above her, if we think of this as a clock face, up around 1 or 2 o'clock, or I can do it down here in the 7 or 8 o'clock. I'm going to start down here. I'm going to hold down my Option key, click to do a sample, and then when you come up, the thing about this, using this tool that you need to keep in mind, this is how some people fuck this up. Some people will do this in 2 different passes. They'll only do part of it, and then they'll let go, and then they'll do another pass to get the other half of it. If you do that, so if I do only part of it up here, so let's say, look at my screen, I've only done this part. Again, I've got all this bad color that's underneath it. That bad color is going to get mixed in to this new move that I've made up here, because that's how the tool works. You have got to cover the entire fuck up in one stroke. So you are coming over here and you are painting the entire thing before you let go. If you don't and you leave part of that original texture or color behind, it will then pervert this new move that we're going to make. And you let go and it got rid of it, it looks pretty good. And I'm going to do a history snapshot of this. Over to your history palette, click on the camera, come up and rename this, and we're going to call it Healing Brush, HB. And then again, go back down and select your healing brush in the history state so that we maintain our history. I'm going to undo that. So once I've gone all the way down here, I'm going to hit Command Z, or I'm going to go back to name change to bring this back. So that's the first tool we can use to fix it, and we've got a history state. We're going to compare them. I'm going to then go the other one, that one where Photoshop actually picks it for you. So click on the healing brush tool and come to the spot healing brush tool. Now with the spot healing brush tool, you need to do the same trick. However, here you don't pick the origin point. As a matter of fact, if you hold down your Option key and click and try and do it, you'll get this warning message saying, yeah, Photoshop does this for you. So all we're going to do is paint over the entire problem with the spot healing brush tool. So again, do not paint over part of it and let go, or it will mix in color that you want to get rid of. And I'm going to let go, and I'm going to do a history snapshot of this and call this the spot healing brush, SHB. And then again, go back down to my name change to bring it back. And then finally, I'm going to show you the tool that I think does this better than pretty much all of them. It's in the healing brush group. It's actually called the patch tool. If you get that tool, this tool works different than the other ones. In this one, you actually select the problem and drag that selection to the area that you want to use to fix the problem. So I'm going to draw a circle around the cigarette burn. Make sure that you go outside the edges. Don't be too close to it, or it will cause a color spill in there. Click and you'll put your cursor down the middle, and you'll see it gives you little arrows that are pointing outward. You want to simply click and drag this to another area that's got the correct texture that you want and let go. Command D to deselect, and we are going to do a history snapshot of this and call it patch. And then again, I'm going to go back down to my deselect on this, or back, I'm sorry, to my name change on this. So now it's back again, but now we can see which tool we like the best. So I'm going to click on the healing brush history state, not bad. The spot healing brush history state, can spot that a mile away, and the patch tool. Patch tool looks best to me. I'm going to go back to the healing brush tool. I'm going to stick with the patch tool. It looks the best to me by far. Work for you guys? Then come back down and click your history state and hit save this file. So this is your homework. So I'm going to come up and do a save as. And put it in my toss folder and hit save. All right, so there are certain things that we need to deal with this way. But what I'm going to show you now is the reason that you have a graphics tablet, and this is how you actually do true retouching. So I need to zoom out to this file. I want to look at this area of the pimple that's right below her, so that she's got a pimple right in the middle of her chin. I need everybody to zoom into that pimple on her chin. Why do you see this as a pimple? Well, yeah, it's a bump, but why does it look like a bump? Is that flat? It's flat, right? Is that flat? Why is one flat and the other one isn't? One has shadows, that's half the game. What else does it have? Highlights. Highlight and shadow are what build in dimension. Lack of highlight and shadow are what destroy dimension. So why on earth, looking at this, why do I see the pimple? Highlight and shadow both. Guys, you don't have a highlight without a shadow. If you just got a highlight, you got a white screen or whatever. You need both. Highlight and shadow give you dimension. If I can get rid of the highlight and shadow on this, don't I get rid of the pimple? Can't I do that with dodging and burning and not affect the texture of this image at all? Yes, I can, and that's how you do tonal retouching. So to do this, come over to your pixel layer in the layer menu. We are going to build a tonal retouching layer. To do that, there's a gazillion ways of doing it, but I'm going to show you the fastest, most expedient way of doing it. You don't want to just click on add a new layer. You want to hold down your option key and then click on add new layer, and it will open up a new layer dialog box where we can do all of our settings. So instead of doing this one at a time, making a layer, then going to fill it, and all, we can do it all here in one shot. So you're going to rename this and you're going to call it Tonal Retouch Small. I do small, some people do detail. Then in the blending mode, you're going to click on the drop down menu and you're going to come down to Soft Light. And then under Soft Light, there's a check mark where you can say Fill Soft Light with neutral color. You're going to check that and say OK. Say what? Yeah, they're not making any other changes. And you'll notice now that I've got a gray layer on top of that, but you don't see it. And the reason you don't see it is because in the soft light, in all the contrast blending modes, soft light, overlay, all of those, whatever, anything that's 50% gray has no effect on your image. However, anything that's darker, well, we'll find out right now. So I'm going to ask you to hit the B key to get the brush tool. Normal blending mode. I'm going to make this a hard brush. Please do this with me. And then black is my foreground color. I'm just going to do a mark and bring it down. And you can see, because I'm in a soft light blending mode, it's not replacing this with black. It's actually just making this part of my image darker. If you hit the X key and drag a line down, you can see it's not changing the color of this. It's actually making it lighter. This is the way a lot of people have been taught to dodge and burn, is using soft light layers like this. So that's sort of where we want to go, but not entirely where we want to go on all of this guy. The problem in doing white and black for this, they will allow us to dodge and burn, but they also impose color on this. So in soft light layer, it picks up the tone, but it's also going to pick up color. Black and white have no color. So what happens is that if you use black and white to do this work, you end up desaturating that part of your image because it is adding gray to it. Does that make sense? So instead, what I need to do is I need to develop dodging and burning colors that will allow me to do this work that are not based on black and white. So I'm going to go back in history when I just did this whole new layer to get rid of those strokes. We now need to make a dodging and burning color. So to do that, click on your foreground color picker. It'll open up the color picker. And then you simply need to click somewhere on this girl's skin. Again, I would avoid things like where you knew heavy makeup would be. I would avoid lipstick. I would avoid all those kinds of things. I'm just going to pick general color of her skin. When you click on that, this will actually give you the color of her skin. Now we are going to be looking at HSB right here. The hue is correct. What I need to change in this is the brightness. So you will see if you click on the B radio button, you'll get to brightness. That means your column now is brightness. Grab the two, yes. Just click on the foreground color and it opens up. Then click on the figure. It gives you the color of her skin. Are you good? Okay. Again, I'm going to pick this up. Hang on right here. I hit something wrong. Hang on 1 second. Okay. click on brightness. I'm going to grab the two little triangles on the brightness, and you need to crank this up. And I am looking at my readout right here. I like to get around the low to mid 90s. You don't want to go all the way up. If you go all the way up, your image, it'll be too light. You'll lose, you won't have anything to really work with. It'll end up getting really close to white again. So I'm going to do around a 94, 95, somewhere in there. It seems light enough for me. This is also way too saturated. So you need to click on the saturation slider next, and then you need to pull the saturation down, and you'll see your color starts to get lighter. I typically go in the mid-teens, so 13, 14, somewhere in that range here. If you go all the way down, you end up with a very light tone of gray, which we don't want. So again, I'm going to run it down till, so this is my, if you want this same exact value that I've got a 17 for my hue, a 13 for my saturation, and a 94 for my brightness, and I'm going to say okay to that. So that's my dodging color. I need to then do my burning color. So you need to select the background color, and that is just click on that. It'll also open up the color picker for you. And again, I'm going to click on the same sample of your skin. This gives me your skin color. I'm going to click on brightness again, and I'm going to pull my brightness down. You don't want to go all the way down, but I'm pulling my brightness down in that sort of 16, 17, somewhere in the mid-teens range. But in this case, because it loses so much color when you get that dark, you actually need to amp the saturation up a little bit. It needs to have some color. So I'm pushing the color up, my saturation up to around, somewhere close to, in the 40s range, somewhere in there. If you want the exact same color I've actually got a hue of 22, a saturation of 46, and a brightness of 18. So then I'm going to click on this to close this up. I am going to be working on my tonal retouching. I am going to do this. Remember I told you can't do this class without a tablet? This is going to be why. So what I'm going to show you right now is how you actually use your graphic tablet to do this. A lot of people will go in here and try to paint doing this. You do not paint. Yes. Mid-40s. You do not paint. If you paint with this, you will spot your retouching. What you do is this. I'm going to do it upside down on mine because I don't want to actually do this on my image. You do this. Dot 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 dot. You don't do any other mark ever. Ever. And believe me, I can spot it. So when you cheat and you try to come in here and I spot it, I'm going to spank you. Dot 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 dot. Try doing that with a mouse. Click 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 click. Do that for 8 hours. Yeah, you'll be in the hospital. Your fingers are all wrapped up. Carpal tunnel. Yeah. Anyway, so this is how it works. Watch my screen. Don't do this. So we're going to start doing this using a completely soft brush. So completely soft brush. Again, the B key, 0 hardness for your brush. In the blending mode, you can leave that at normal. In your opacity, this is now for our highlight part, you need to drop your opacity down to 6%. How many of you guys ever work at 6%? Nobody thinks you can do anything. I'll be at 5%, it's close enough. Leave your flow at 100%. So this is how we're going to do it. Watch my screen. I'm going to go through this first just to make sure everybody knows how to do this part, and then I'm going to let you guys do it. I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller to be roughly the size of that the pimple head that's actually right here. I've now got my dodging color. My dodging color's up there. I need to burn down the head of this pimple. So simply hit the X key that gives me my burning color, and then here, watch how I do this. Dot 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 dot. Dot stop. It's not there yet, but I've got this whole dark surround that I need to. So do not push your burning too far because we're trying to even them out. So I'm going to hit the X key to get my dodging color. I'm going to make my brush slightly bigger to deal with this. Dot 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 dot. Stop. X key to go back to your burning color in the middle. Make your brush slightly smaller. Dot, 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 dot. X key to go back to your dodging color. I've got a bigger area now, so I can go to a much larger brush. Dot, 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 dot. Smaller brush. X key. Burning. X key. Dodging. Pimple be gone. I'm going to zoom back out. I haven't fucked the texture up at all. This is all tonal. I have not done anything to the texture of this skin. Zero. But I got rid of the pimple. Does this make sense, everyone? So go after the pimple. We've got 10 minutes, and I can only give you 2 minutes to go after it. You don't need to get it totally done. I just need to know if you're having a problem with it doing anything. So again, remember, very soft brush, normal blending mode, 6% opacity, 100% flow, working on your soft white layer. And tell me, is it working? Everybody feeling kind of good about this? Nobody's having a problem, that there's nothing happening. So if you do have a problem where nothing seems to be happening, a lot of times what happens in this is that you'll have a selection going. If you've got an active selection going that you did for something else, and you're trying to do this work, the selection is controlling where you can be. Just hit the Command D to make sure you have no live selection going and you'll be fine. All right, I don't want you guys to finish this. We need to look at other areas here first, and you're going to continue to work on this. So again, save your work. This is your homework. I need you to go to the area that's right underneath her eye. So you'll see that there's a series of lines that are right underneath her eye. I'm going to go after this one line, the one that I can see the most that's right here. So I'm under her right eye. So again, this is also done tonally. This is where I told you, though, everybody's the way people will typically attack this is that they'll try to paint this line out. You do not do that. That line becomes very obvious. You can make it lighter, which is what we're going to try to do, but you need to actually have it broken up in order to not see it, and that's where the dots come in. So I'm going to go after this part right here. Again, I'm going to make my brush slightly smaller, and then again, it's dot, 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 dot. So you guys can actually start to do this part right now. Again, make sure that you're using your dodging color, not your burning color on this. But again, do not paint. If you click and drag a line along, I've told you before, I can spot that thing a million miles away. Do not do that. And at a certain point in doing this, you're going to just say to yourself, well, fuck this. I'm not doing anything, right? Then turn your layer on and off and tell me you're not doing anything. I just got rid of that line. I'm going to zip back out. Gone. Zip back in so you guys can see a little bit better. On and off, gone. Does that make sense? All right, while we're in this area, see this little white dot? Look at my screen that I'm talking about right here. This little white dot that's right here. We need to get rid of that part. So to get rid of that part, again, I need to burn this down. So I'm going to hit the X key to get my burning color in here. And I'm just going to go after this guy. I'm going to just start. So go after it. I need you guys to keep hitting this thing as hard as you can. And just keep it up. 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 And then look at my screen. I never got rid of it, but now I've got this beautiful frame around it that's jet black, right? I made it worse. Why isn't this working? It's white. There's nothing to burn. So in a case like this, if you want to see what is going on, turn off the eyeballs for both of your underneath layers. You will then be able to see the gray of this retouching layer. This is why we fill with gray, is so that you can spot this. You could have done this on a transparent layer. It would still work, but you would never, look at how faint the whole line that I moved out. This is the line that I got rid of. You would never be able to spot that, so you don't know how to go in and fix it. But you remember I said, so we need to fix this part that's now screwed up here. To fix this part, remember, if this is a medium gray, a middle gray, it's transparent. So I'm going to hit the L key to get the lasso tool. I'm going to circle this guy, and then I'm simply going to come up to my edit menu, down to fill. Sorry, that was stroke. Down to fill. In my drop-down menu for contents, I'm going to do 50% gray, blending mode normal, 100% opacity, okay. It just fills it with gray. And now if you turn on the other two lights, guys, right here, you'll see you got rid of that halo that you put around this guy. Command D to deselect. The only way to get rid of these things, again, is to go back to your retouching tool. This is going to be, again, a spot healing tool or a healing brush tool. I'm going to do the regular healing brush tool. So I'm going to grab the healing brush tool. I now need to go back down to my pixel retouching layer. You can't do this on your soft light layer. Down to that, I'm going to make my brush considerably smaller. In doing this, I'm going to click on my, you do want a 50% hardness on this. That is correct. Sorry. And then again, I'm going to make this as small as I can get this. But now I'm actually going to use a blending mode for this. What is the problem with this little white dot? It is too light. I need to make it darker. But I don't want to change any of the area around it. The area around it is fine. So if you change the blending mode of your healing brush to only darken and then sample an area that's really close to this, so I'm going to hold down my option key and click to sample this, then if I go over this, even if my brush is larger than the dot, it will not change anything but the dot because I've restricted the blending mode. Does that make sense, everyone? So I'm simply going to go after that guy and it's done. I'm going to do, there's a number of them. There's another one that's right down here. I'm going to do the very same trick. So all of that. If we take a look on her skin, you can actually see there's a couple of ones that are on her skin that are going to actually need to be fixed like that in the same way. So again, that's basically what's going on in here. Blah, 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 blah. There are also some places on her skin that are too dark to actually get those to lift as well. Although I'm not seeing any of them right now. You can run into areas that are too dark, but you see this big pebbly area of skin that's right here, right? This is all done tonally. So back to your tonal retouch layer, and then again, the B key to get your brush. I've got a 5% opacity. I typically start with making things lighter. So I'm going to do my lightning part here, and I'm just going to start, and you need to watch my screen. You need to move fast and quick. Do not dwell on any one place too long. There's a really bad joke about that. But anyway, so I'm just going to start here and dot, 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 and then keep moving around. Again, I get a little frustrated. This isn't happening quite fast enough for me, so I'm going to bump this up to maybe a 7%, 9%. Try it again here. X key to make my my burning color in here. And again, you say, well, Versa, there's nothing happening here. I don't see anything happening. And then you do this. And there's a ton of stuff happening. Questions about this? All right, I have one thing to show you, and we're done. Are we good on this part? So your homework is to do tonal retouching to make this skin flawless. Right? There's more to it. There's a part about dealing with her hair. We haven't gotten over her hair part right now. It's kind of like what we did with Sunny. So if you want to give it a shot, give it a shot. But anyway, but I want to show you what tonal retouching can truly do. And then we're done. Does that look like skin to you? Right? Flawless. Check this out. I'm going to show you. This is all done tonally. No, it is not. So take a look at this image, though. Look at this. This takes hours to do this. Do not plan on sitting down and knocking this out in an hour. You can't do it. The last thing I want to show you is this. Because we did our what we call our tonal small. That was the one that we made. You can also do a tonal large layer. You want to keep it separate from the small, because what the large is going to do are bigger areas of her face. So for instance, I'm going to turn it all off. You can see on her face that there are dark parts under her eyes. There's also dark parts right here on the side of her nose over here. She's actually got a mustache line that's running right here. There's also a darker part that's happening under here. You go after those things with a tonal large layer, and this is what it does. So you can see this completely different. It functions exactly the same way. You use the same dodging and burning colors, but if you take a look at it, you will actually see it's much bigger areas, right? But the reason you want to keep your large separate from your small is that if you fuck up the large and you're doing it on your small layer and you have to start all over again, it means you have to start all your small stuff all over again, and you will hate your life. It's a bigger brush, and it's in bigger general areas. So you can see this is all stuff that's like right around her eye. It's under her eyes. It's any of the bigger areas. You're trying to, if anybody in here knows makeup, if you think about foundation, what foundation is designed to do is to smooth out the blotchiness of your skin. It's not really designed to cover necessarily, but it's designed to smooth out. So again, if we take a look at her again, what's actually going on here, you can see this is lightening up the areas under her eyes. It's lightening up this big area, the side of her nose in here. It's actually going after her upper lip. It's smoothing out those bigger areas, but that's vastly different than this tonal retouch small area, which looks like this. But guys, take a look. I need everybody to take a look at this. If you don't see something like this, you're not doing this thing right. And I mean, look at this. This is insanity. But this is what it takes. You said you wanted to know how to do it. This is how you do it. Are we good? Questions? All right, I'll see you guys next week. See ya.